when the city's most dangerous man becomes her only refuge. Red blood on white snow. A man steps out of a gleaming black car. 2 bullets. Absolute silence. Livia Vale didn't know that tonight, in that dark alley, her life would be rewritten by the hand of someone who would never forgive. Cassian Moretti, a name that sent shivers down the city's spine. And from the moment she slipped into the luxurious leather seat beside him, everything she ever knew about safety, danger, love, crumbled. Follow this story to the end. Like and comment with the name of the city you're watching to let me know how far the story has progressed. The bass line from inside Velvet Saint rattled through the brick walls and into Lyra's bones as she stepped out the back entrance into the alley. 3 in the morning. February in Chicago didn't give a damn about anyone's exhaustion. The wind cut through her thin jacket like it had teeth. She pulled it tighter anyway, a useless gesture she'd made 1,000 times before, and started walking toward the L station 6 blocks away. Her feet ached, not the dull throb she could ignore, but the sharp stabbing kind that made every step a small negotiation with her body. 5-inch heels for 8 hours. Smile until your face cramped. Laugh at jokes that weren't funny. Dodge hands that wandered too far. Collect tips that barely covered groceries. That was the trade. That was survival. She counted the cash in her jacket pocket without looking. 140, maybe 50. The bills were damp from being clutched too long, wrinkled and soft like old skin. It wouldn't be enough. It was never enough. Rent was due in 4 days and she was short by $300. The eviction notice was already taped to her door. Bright orange, impossible to miss, impossible to ignore. Third notice, final notice. Lyra tried not to think about it. Tried not to think about calling her mother, which would mean admitting she'd been right all along. You're throwing your life away in that city. Tried not to think about Marcus, her ex, who'd probably laugh if she came crawling back. Tried not to think about anything except putting one foot in front of the other until she made it home to her studio apartment with the broken heater and the neighbor who screamed at his girlfriend through the walls. The alley stretched ahead of her, darker than it should have been. One of the streetlights was out. She'd walked this route 100 times, maybe more, but tonight something felt off. The kind of off that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Made her grip her keys between her fingers the way that self-defense video on YouTube had taught her. She heard them before she saw them. Footsteps. Heavy. Multiple sets. Coming from behind. Hey, sweetheart. Lyra didn't turn around. She walked faster, her heels clicking against the wet pavement in a rhythm that sounded too much like panic. The L station was still 4 blocks away. 4 blocks might as well have been 4 miles. Don't be rude, we're talking to you. 3 of them. She could tell from the voices, from the way the footsteps spread out to box her in. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her throat went dry. She thought about screaming, but who the hell would hear her? Who would come? I don't want any trouble, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. She kept walking. I'm just trying to get home. One of them laughed. The sound made her skin crawl. You work at that club, right? Velvet something? I don't have any money. That's not what we're after. They were closer now. Close enough that she could smell cigarettes and cheap cologne. Close enough that when she finally risked a glance over her shoulder, she could see their faces in the dim light. Young, maybe mid-20s, the kind of guys who thought the world owed them something and were willing to take it by force. Lyra's fingers tightened around her keys. Her mind raced through options. Run, but she was in heels and they were faster. Scream, but there was no one around. Fight, but there were 3 of them, and she was 5'4" and exhausted. The tallest one stepped in front of her, blocking her path. He smiled, and it was the worst thing she'd seen all night. Where you going so fast? Move. Her voice shook now. She hated that, hated the weakness in it, hated that they could hear it. Make us. The one behind her grabbed her arm. His grip was iron, his fingers digging into her bicep hard enough to bruise. Lyra twisted, trying to jerk away, but he held on. The keys fell from her hand and clattered to the ground. Let go of me. Relax, baby. We just want to talk. She drove her elbow backward into his ribs as hard as she could. He grunted, his grip loosening just enough for her to wrench free. She stumbled forward, her ankle twisting painfully in her heel, but she didn't stop. She ran. She made it maybe 10 feet before they caught her. The tall one slammed her against the brick wall so hard the air rushed out of her lungs. Her cheek scraped against the rough surface. She tasted blood. Someone laughed again, and the sound echoed in the narrow space, bouncing off the walls until it felt like there were a dozen of them instead of 3. Feisty. I like that. Hands on her waist, on her hips. She thrashed, kicked backward, connected with something solid. Another grunt. More laughter. They thought this was funny. They thought she was entertainment. Get the fuck off me! She was screaming now, not caring who heard, not caring about anything except getting away. Her nails raked across someone's face. Blood welled up in thin lines. You bitch! The crack of a fist against her jaw snapped her head to the side. Stars exploded behind her eyes. Her knees buckled. She would have hit the ground if they hadn't been holding her up. Then everything stopped. Not gradually. Not like someone turning down the volume. Just stopped. The hands were gone. The laughter cut off mid-sound. Lyra blinked, trying to clear her vision, trying to understand what had just happened. She was still against the wall, her legs shaking so badly she could barely stand, but the men weren't touching her anymore. They were looking at something behind her. No, someone. A car had pulled up at the mouth of the alley. Black. Expensive. The kind of car that didn't belong in this neighborhood. The engine purred, low and predatory. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. Lyra couldn't see his face at first. Just the silhouette, tall and broad-shouldered, backlit by the headlights. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having to doubt yourself, never having to wonder if you were enough. Each step was deliberate, measured. He didn't hurry. Walk away. His voice was quiet, calm. The kind of calm that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. The 3 men hesitated. The tall one who'd hit her puffed out his chest, trying to look tough. This doesn't concern you, man. Keep moving. The stranger stopped about 15 feet away. Lyra could see him clearly now. Dark hair, pushed back from a face that could have been carved from stone. Sharp jaw. Eyes that caught the light and reflected it back like a cat's. Expensive suit, perfectly tailored, not a wrinkle in sight despite the late hour. He looked like money. He looked like power. He looked like someone you didn't want to fuck with. I'll say it once more. Still that unsettling calm. Walk away. The tall one laughed, but it sounded forced now, nervous. There's 3 of us, asshole. What are you gonna do? The stranger tilted his head slightly, as if genuinely considering the question. Then he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. You can find out if you'd like. Something in his tone must have gotten through, because the one who'd grabbed Lyra first took a step back. Come on, man. Let's just go. She's not worth it. Yeah, listen to your friend. The tall one was still trying to save face, but he was backing up too. Not worth the trouble. They left. Not running, but close to it. Their footsteps faded into the distance until it was just Lyra and the stranger in the alley, the only sound her ragged breathing and the idling engine of that black car. She should have said something. Thank you. Or maybe run, because one dangerous stranger replacing 3 didn't necessarily improve her situation. But she couldn't make her legs work, couldn't make her mouth form words. She just stood there against the wall, bleeding and shaking, while he watched her with those unsettling eyes. You're hurt. Not a question. An observation. Lyra touched her cheek. Her fingers came away red. I'm fine. You're not fine. I said I'm fine. Sharper now. Defensive. She pushed away from the wall, testing her weight on her twisted ankle. Pain shot up her leg, but she didn't let it show. Thanks for whatever that was. I can take it from here. Where's home? None of your business. He didn't react to her tone, just kept watching her with that unreadable expression. It's 3 a.m. You're bleeding. Your ankle's injured. Those 3 might be waiting around the corner, so I'll ask again. Where's home? I can take care of myself. Clearly. The word hit like a slap. Not cruel exactly, but brutally honest in a way that made her want to scream. Because he was right. She couldn't take care of herself. She'd proven that spectacularly tonight. Look, she said, forcing herself to meet his eyes, even though something about his gaze made her want to look away. I appreciate the help, really, but I don't know you, and I don't get into cars with strangers, so my name is Cassian Moretti. He said it like it should mean something, like she should recognize it. Now we're not strangers. That's not how that works. It's how I'm making it work. The certainty in his voice was maddening, like he'd already decided how this was going to play out, and her opinion was just a formality. Lyra wanted to tell him to go to hell, wanted to limp away with whatever dignity she had left and pretend this night never happened. But her ankle throbbed, her face hurt. She had no idea if those men were really gone or just waiting. And despite everything, despite the warning bells going off in her head, there was something about the way he stood there, patient and immovable, that made her feel safer than she had in a long time. North side, she heard herself say, near Wrigleyville. He nodded once, then gestured toward the car. After you. The interior was exactly what she expected. Leather seats that probably cost more than her yearly rent. Wood trim. Everything spotless, everything perfect. It smelled like expensive cologne and something else she couldn't identify, something dark and spicy that made her head swim. Cassian slid into the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He didn't ask for her address, didn't turn on the radio, just drove, his hand steady on the wheel, his expression neutral. Lyra pressed herself against the passenger door and tried not to think about how stupid this was. Getting into a car with a man she didn't know. A man who'd appeared out of nowhere and scared off 3 attackers with nothing but his presence. A man who wore suits that cost more than her life savings and drove a car she couldn't even name. "You didn't call the police?" she said after several blocks of silence. "No." "Why not?" "Would you have wanted me to?" She thought about that, about sitting in a police station for hours, filling out reports, reliving what had happened over and over again. About missing work tomorrow because she was too traumatized to function. About the way cops looked at girls like her, girls who worked in clubs, who wore tight dresses and high heels, who should have known better than to walk alone at night. "No," she admitted. "Then there's your answer." More silence. They were heading north on Lakeshore Drive now, the dark expanse of Lake Michigan stretching out to their right. The city lights reflected on the water's surface, fractured and shimmering. "How did you know?" Lyra asked. "That I was in trouble, I mean. You just appeared." "I was driving by." "Nobody just drives by that area at 3 in the morning." He glanced at her, the corner of his mouth lifting in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I do." "Why?" "Business." "What kind of business?" "The kind that keeps me awake at night." It wasn't an answer, not really, but something in his tone suggested she shouldn't push. So she didn't. She just watched the city slide past the window and wondered what the hell she'd gotten herself into. They pulled up in front of her building 20 minutes later. The fluorescent light over the entrance flickered weakly, casting strange shadows across the cracked concrete steps. Lyra's eviction notice was still on her door, visible even from the street, bright orange, mocking. "This is me." She reached for the door handle. "Wait!" His hand was already in his jacket pocket. He pulled out a business card and held it out to her. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, Cassian Moretti, CEO, Moretti Holdings. "If those men come back," he said quietly, "or if you need anything, call that number." "I don't need—" "Take it anyway." There was no arguing with that tone. Lyra took the card, her fingers brushing against his for just a second. His skin was warm, rough at the fingertips like he worked with his hands, even though nothing else about him suggested manual labor. "Thank you," she said, and meant it despite herself. "Lock your door." "I always do." "Lock it twice tonight." Then he was pulling away from the curb, the black car disappearing into the night like it had never been there at all. Lyra stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, turning the business card over in her hands, before finally limping up the stairs to her apartment. She did lock the door twice. And then, because she couldn't help herself, she pulled out her phone and typed Cassian Moretti into the search bar. The results made her stomach drop. Articles. Dozens of them. Photos of him at charity galas, shaking hands with politicians, cutting ribbons at building openings. Moretti Holdings expands into real estate development. Billionaire Cassian Moretti donates to Children's Hospital. The Moretti family legacy, from humble beginnings to empire. But beneath those polished headlines, buried a few pages deep in her search, were different kinds of articles. Rumors, speculation, questions that reporters asked carefully with disclaimers and anonymous sources. Federal investigation into Moretti Holdings yields no charges. Alleged organized crime ties remain unproven. The Shadow Empire. Who really runs Chicago? Lyra's hand shook as she scrolled. She should have known. Should have recognized the signs. The way he'd moved. The way those men had backed down instantly. The car, the suit, the calm certainty that came from never being told no. Cassian Moretti wasn't just wealthy. He was dangerous. She threw her phone onto the bed and walked to the bathroom, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. The bruise on her jaw was already darkening. The scrape on her cheek would scar. She looked like hell. She felt worse, and she couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at her. Not with pity, not with lust, with something else entirely. Something that made her feel exposed and protected at the same time. She should throw away his card. Forget this ever happened. Go back to her life of late shifts and overdue bills and pretending everything was fine. Should. Instead, she tucked the card into her wallet, right behind her license where she'd see it every day. Just in case. The next morning arrived too soon and felt too bright. Lyra's alarm screamed at 7, and she slapped it into silence with a groan that came from somewhere deep in her soul. Everything hurt. Her jaw throbbed in time with her heartbeat. Her ankle had swollen overnight, turning an impressive shade of purple that would have been fascinating if it didn't make walking feel like stepping on broken glass. She called in sick to the temp agency where she had a data entry gig scheduled for the afternoon. The woman on the other end of the line sounded irritated but not surprised. Lyra had burned through most of her sick days already. One more strike, and they'd probably drop her from their roster entirely. Another problem for another day. She limped to the kitchen and made coffee with the last of her grounds. The eviction notice seemed to glow on her door. Impossible to ignore. 4 days? $300 short. She'd considered selling her laptop, but it was ancient and probably worth $50 if she was lucky. Her phone was leased. Her furniture was mostly stuff she'd found on the curb or bought at Goodwill. She had nothing to sell except herself, and that line of thinking led to places she'd sworn she'd never go. The coffee tasted like dirt, but she drank it anyway, standing at her window and looking out at the gray Chicago morning. People rushed past on the sidewalk below, bundled in winter coats, probably heading to real jobs with benefits and retirement plans and futures that extended beyond the next rent payment. Lyra's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, expecting a text from her boss at Velvet Saint or maybe her mother calling to lecture her about life choices. Instead, it was an unknown number. "How's the ankle?" Her breath caught. She stared at the screen for a long moment, her coffee forgotten. There was only one person who would ask that question. "How did you get my number?" she typed back. The response came immediately. "I have resources." Of course he did. Men like Cassian Moretti always had resources. Probably had access to things that would make her head spin if she thought too hard about them. "It's fine," she lied. "Thanks again for last night." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Have dinner with me." Lyra almost dropped her phone. She read the message twice, then a third time, convinced she'd misunderstood. But no, there it was, clear as day, 4 words that shouldn't have made her heart race the way it did. "I don't think that's a good idea," she typed carefully. Why not? Where did she even start? Because he was a stranger. Because she'd spent half the night reading articles about federal investigations and organized crime. Because men who looked like him and lived like him didn't ask girls like her to dinner without wanting something in return. "Because I don't know you," she finally sent. "That's the point of dinner. To get to know each other. I'm not 7 o'clock. I'll pick you up." I didn't say yes. You didn't say no. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that's not how consent worked, that she wasn't some woman who could be steamrolled into decisions by a man with money and confidence. But her fingers hovered over the keyboard and nothing came out. Because part of her wanted to say yes. Part of her wanted to see him again, even though every logical bone in her body screamed that this was a mistake. Wanted to understand what it was about him that had made her feel safer in his car than she'd felt in months. Wanted to know if that moment in the alley had been real or if she'd imagined the way he'd looked at her, like she was something worth protecting. "One dinner," she typed before she could stop herself. "And you're buying, obviously. And if I don't like it, you never contact me again. Deal." Lyra set her phone down and pressed her palms against her eyes. What the hell was she doing? She had no business going to dinner with a man like Cassian Moretti. She should be focused on finding $300 before the eviction became final. Should be icing her ankle and figuring out how to cover the bruise on her face for work tomorrow. Instead, she spent the next 2 hours tearing through her closet, trying to find something to wear that didn't look like it came from a thrift store clearance rack. He picked her up at exactly 7 o'clock in the same black car from the night before. Lyra had been watching from her window, and when the car pulled up, she'd felt her stomach do something complicated and uncomfortable. She'd settled on a simple black dress, the nicest thing she owned, bought for a college friend's wedding 3 years ago, and borrowed heels from her neighbor Simone that didn't make her ankle scream quite as much as her own. She'd covered the bruise on her jaw with makeup, but it still showed through if you looked close enough. Cassian looked at it when she slid into the passenger seat. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin, but he didn't comment. "You look beautiful," he said instead. "You look like you're going to a funeral." He was wearing another perfect suit, this one charcoal gray with a white shirt open at the collar. No tie. She'd expected him to look softer without the tie, more casual, but somehow it had the opposite effect. Made him look dangerous, like a predator who'd decided to play dress-up. "A funeral would be more enjoyable than most of my business meetings," he said, pulling away from the curb. "Rough day?" "You could say that." They drove in silence for a while. Lyra snuck glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking, studying the sharp line of his profile, the way his hands rested easy on the steering wheel. He drove like he did everything else, with absolute control. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. "You'll see." "That's not ominous at all." The corner of his mouth lifted. "Trust me." "I don't." "I know." He said it like it didn't bother him, like her distrust was expected, maybe even respected. "But you're here anyway." She couldn't argue with that. The restaurant turned out to be one of those places Lyra had only ever seen in magazines. The kind where reservations were booked months in advance and the prices weren't listed on the menu because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. The hostess greeted Cassian by name and led them to a private room in the back, away from the other diners. "You come here often?" Lyra asked once they were alone. "When necessary." "Is this necessary?" "I wanted privacy." "For what?" "Conversation." The waiter appeared with water and a wine list the size of a small novel. Cassian ordered without looking at it, something French that probably cost more than Lyra's monthly rent. She wanted to protest, to say she'd be fine with water, but his expression suggested the wine wasn't up for debate. "So," she said once they were alone again, "tell me about yourself, Cassian Moretti. What do you want to know?" "Let's start with the basics. What do you do?" "I run a company." "I gathered that from your business card." "What kind of company?" "Real estate development, import-export, investments. The portfolio is diverse." "That sounds rehearsed." His smile was sharp. "Because I've said it 1,000 times." "Say something unrehearsed then." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with those unsettling eyes. "I think you're afraid of me." "I'm not, but you're here anyway, which means you're either brave or reckless. I haven't decided which yet." "Maybe both." "Maybe." The wine arrived. Cassian poured for both of them, and Lyra took a sip that probably would have been wasted on her uncultured palate. It tasted expensive. Everything about this man tasted expensive. "Your turn," he said. "Tell me about Livia Vale." "Not much to tell. I work at a nightclub. I live in a shitty apartment in Wrigleyville. I'm $300 short on rent and probably going to be evicted." She hadn't meant to say that last part. It slipped out before she could stop it, sharp and bitter. Cassian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Why are you short?" "Because minimum wage plus tips doesn't pay for living in one of the most expensive cities in America." "You could move." "I could do a lot of things." "But you won't." "No." "Why not?" Lyra set down her wine glass harder than she'd intended. "Because I came here to make something of myself, because I told everyone back home that I was going to succeed in the big city and prove them all wrong. And leaving now would mean admitting they were right, that I was stupid to try, that I should have stayed where I belonged and married some hometown boy and squeezed out babies and died without ever knowing if I could have been more." The words hung in the air between them. Too honest, too raw. She'd revealed more in 30 seconds than she'd meant to reveal in a lifetime. Cassian didn't look away, didn't flinch, just nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. I understand that. Do you? More than you know. Before she could ask what he meant, the waiter returned with their first course. Some kind of appetizer that looked like art on a plate. Lyra ate it and tasted nothing, too aware of Cassian watching her across the table. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Always. Last night, in the alley. Why did you help me? Because you needed help. That's not an answer. It's the truth. But why you? You just happened to be driving by at exactly the right moment? His jaw tightened again, that muscle jumping. I was following you. The confession hit like ice water. Lyra set down her fork carefully, her appetite gone. You were what? I saw you leave the club, saw you walking alone. The neighborhood's not safe at 3 a.m. So you followed me? Yes. That's... She couldn't even find the words. Creepy, invasive, terrifying, all of the above. That's not okay. I know. Then why did you do it? For the first time since she'd met him, Cassian looked uncomfortable. His perfect composure cracked just slightly, enough that she could see something vulnerable underneath. Because I saw you at the club 3 months ago, he said quietly, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since. Lyra's heart was doing that complicated thing again, racing and stopping at the same time. You've been watching me for 3 months? Not watching, aware of. There's a difference. Is there? I made sure you got home safely when you worked late shifts. Made sure no one bothered you, that's all. That's stalking. It's protection. I didn't ask for protection. I know. He met her eyes, and the intensity there made her want to look away. But I gave it anyway. Because the alternative was walking away and wondering every night if you made it home. And I couldn't do that. She should leave. Should stand up right now, walk out of this restaurant, and never look back. This wasn't romance. It was obsession. It was control dressed up in expensive suits and whispered confessions. But she didn't move. Why me? She asked instead, her voice smaller than she'd intended. I don't know. That's a cop-out. It's the truth. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, closing the distance between them. I've asked myself the same question 100 times. Why you? What is it about you that makes me break every rule I've ever set for myself? And I still don't have an answer. All I know is that when I saw you in that alley last night, when those men had their hands on you, something inside me went dark, violent, and the only thing that mattered was getting you safe. Lyra's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table to hide it. You said you run a real estate company. I do. But that's not all you do, is it? It wasn't a question. Cassian didn't answer right away. He just watched her, weighing something she couldn't see, making calculations she couldn't follow. No, he said finally. That's not all I do. What else? Things that would make you run if I told you. Try me. Lyra? Try me. He was quiet for a long moment. The restaurant hummed around them, silverware clicking against china, muted conversations from other rooms, the soft jazz playing over hidden speakers. Normal sounds from a normal world that felt suddenly very far away. My family's been in Chicago for 4 generations, Cassian said slowly. We built an empire, started with nothing and turned it into everything. But empires aren't built on handshakes and honest work. They're built on blood, on fear, on doing what other men won't do. You're saying I'm saying there are parts of this city that exist because men like me allow them to exist. Businesses that run because we let them run. People who breathe because we haven't decided otherwise. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Lyra's mouth went dry. That's not legal, she whispered. No. That's criminal. Yes. Dangerous. Also yes. And if you have any sense at all, you'll finish this meal, let me take you home, and forget you ever met me. Is that what you want? His eyes locked on hers. No. Then what do you want? You. The word hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Lyra felt like she couldn't breathe, like the walls were closing in and the only solid thing in the universe was the man sitting across from her, watching her with an intensity that should have terrified her. Maybe it did terrify her. Maybe that was the point. "I should go," she heard herself say. "You should." Neither of them moved. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of expensive food and careful conversation that skirted around everything that mattered. They talked about Chicago, about the weather, about nothing at all. But underneath every word was that confession. "I want you." When Cassian finally pulled up in front of her building again, Lyra's head was spinning. The wine, the exhaustion, the sheer impossibility of everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. "Thank you for dinner," she said, reaching for the door handle. "Lyra." She stopped. "That eviction notice on your door." His voice was careful, measured. "How much do you need?" Her stomach dropped. "I can handle it." "How much?" "I said I can handle it." $300. I heard you say it earlier. Let me... No. Why not? Because I don't take money from men I barely know. Even if it means losing your home? Especially then. His jaw tightened, that muscle jumping again. "You're stubborn. You're pushy." "I know." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a card. Not a business card this time, something else. He held it out. "This is my personal line, not the office. Call it any time, day or night." Lyra stared at the card without taking it. "Why would I do that?" "Because despite everything, despite knowing you should run, part of you wants to call. And I'd rather you have a way to reach me than lie to yourself about it." Damn him for being right. She took the card. "Good night, Cassian." "Lock your door." "I will." She made it halfway up the stairs before she heard his car pull away. Inside her apartment, Lyra stood in the dark for a long moment, holding both cards, his business line and his personal line. She should throw them away, should forget this whole thing ever happened. Instead, she put them both in her wallet, right next to the first card he'd given her. 3 cards. 3 lifelines to a man who just confessed to being exactly what her instincts had warned her about. The eviction notice mocked her from the door. $300, 4 days. She fell asleep that night with her phone in her hand, staring at his contact information, her thumb hovering over the call button but never quite pressing it. When she woke up the next morning to pounding on her door, she knew immediately something had changed. Not something, everything. The landlord stood in the hallway, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Vale, I need to speak with you." Her stomach clenched. "I have 4 days. Your rent's been paid." The world tilted. "What?" "Paid in full. Plus next month. Someone contacted the management company this morning with a cashier's check. Your account's current." Lyra couldn't breathe. "Who?" "Didn't give a name, just said to tell you that you're covered." But she knew. Of course she knew. She closed the door and leaned against it, her hand shaking so badly she could barely pull out her phone. "You had no right," she typed to his personal number. The response came within seconds. "I had every right. You're mine to protect now." "I didn't agree to that. You took my card. You went to dinner. You didn't say no when it mattered. That's agreement enough. This isn't... You can't just..." "Monday morning, 9 a.m., report to Moretti Holdings, 47th floor. The receptionist is expecting you. You have an interview for a financial analyst position." Lyra stared at her phone like it had turned into a snake. "I don't have a finance degree. You have a business degree, and you're smarter than half the people I employ. You'll figure it out. I can't just quit my job. Your shift at Velvet Saint ends at 3 a.m. The interview is at 9 a.m. You don't have to quit anything yet. Just show up. And if I don't?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Then I'll stop interfering with your life and you'll never hear from me again. Your choice, Lyra. It's always your choice." She threw her phone onto the bed and pressed her hands against her eyes. This was insane. He was rewriting her life without permission, inserting himself into every corner of her existence like he had the right. The rent, the job interview, all of it happening too fast, too completely, like he was playing chess and she was just a piece on his board. She should tell him to go to hell, should block his number and forget any of this ever happened. But the eviction notice was gone from her door. Her rent was paid. And Monday morning, she found herself standing outside Moretti Holdings at 8:45, wearing the same black dress from dinner and trying not to vomit from nerves. The building was glass and steel, reaching toward the sky like it was trying to escape the city below. Inside, everything was marble and chrome, and people who walked like they owned the world. The receptionist smiled when Lyra gave her name. "Mr. Moretti is expecting you, 47th floor." The elevator ride felt like an execution march. The doors opened onto an office that looked like something out of a movie. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that probably cost more than Lyra's car. And standing at those windows, looking out over Chicago like a king surveying his kingdom, was Cassian Moretti. He turned when she stepped out of the elevator, still in that perfect suit, still with that unsettling calm. "You came," he said. "I came. The interview is with my head of finance. She's expecting you in 20 minutes. And what are you expecting? For you to be brilliant, like I know you are." Lyra crossed her arms. "Why are you doing this? Because you were working yourself to death for minimum wage when you're capable of so much more. You don't know me. I know enough. This is crazy. Yes, I should leave." "You should." But she didn't. And 20 minutes later, she was sitting across from a woman named Margaret Chen, who asked her questions about financial modeling and market analysis that Lyra somehow managed to answer. Her business degree was 5 years old and mostly theoretical, but she'd always been good with numbers, good at seeing patterns. Good enough that by the end of the hour, Margaret was offering her a position. "Starting salary is $90,000, she said, sliding a packet across the table, "plus benefits and quarterly bonuses based on performance. You'd start Monday if you accept." $90,000. Lyra had never made more than 30 in her life. "I need to think about it," she heard herself say. "Of course. Take the weekend. Let us know Monday morning." Cassian was waiting when she left Margaret's office. He fell into step beside her, his hand hovering near the small of her back without quite touching. "How did it go?" "She offered me the job." "I knew she would." "You had this planned from the start." "Yes." They rode the elevator down in silence. Outside, Chicago stretched around them in all its gray winter glory. Lyra felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into water that might be shallow or might go on forever. "I can't take the job," she said. "Why not?" "Because you arranged it. Because it's not real. Because the moment I accept, I'm admitting that I can't make it on my own." Cassian stopped walking, turned to face her fully. "The job is real. Margaret doesn't hire people as favors. She hired you because you're qualified. What I arranged was the interview. What you did in that room was all you." "But you have a choice, Lyra. You always have a choice. Take the job. Don't take the job. Keep working at the club. Walk away from all of this and never look back. But don't tell yourself you're weak for accepting help. There's no shame in letting someone care about you." "Is that what this is? Caring?" His eyes met hers, and something in them made her chest ache. "Yes. It feels like something else." "What does it feel like?" "Like I'm being trapped." He flinched, actually flinched like she'd struck him. "If that's how you see it, then I apologize. That was never my intention." "Then what was your intention?" "To give you a chance. To show you that your life doesn't have to be survival. That there's another way. Your way. A better way." Lyra wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that better was subjective and she didn't need saving, but standing there on the sidewalk with him looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, she couldn't find the words. "I need time," she said finally. "Take all the time you need." He didn't try to stop her when she walked away, didn't call after her or follow her, just let her go, standing there outside his tower like a guard watching over something precious. Lyra made it 3 blocks before she had to stop and catch her breath. Everything was changing too fast. The rent, the job, him. All of it converging into something she didn't know how to handle. She should be happy, should be grateful. $90,000 a year would change everything. Would mean stability, savings, maybe even a future beyond the next paycheck. But it would also mean accepting help from Cassian Moretti. Accepting whatever this thing was between them. Accepting that maybe, just maybe, she couldn't do this alone. She worked her shift at Velvet Saint that night in a daze, smiled at customers, collected tips, pretended everything was normal while her mind spun in circles. At 2 in the morning, during her break, she pulled out her phone and stared at Cassian's contact information. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she typed, "I'll take the job." His response was immediate. "Good. I'll see you Monday." This doesn't mean anything. It means everything. Sleep well, Lara. She put her phone away and went back to work, ignoring the way her hands shook and her heart raced. Because she'd just made a decision that would either save her life or destroy it, and she wouldn't know which until it was too late to turn back. Monday morning hit like a freight train. Lyra woke up at 6:30 with her stomach in knots and her head pounding from exactly 3 hours of sleep. She'd laid awake most of the night staring at the ceiling, second-guessing every decision that had led her to this moment. The black dress hung on her closet door like an accusation. She'd worn it twice already, dinner with Cassian, the interview, and now it would mark her first day at Moretti Holdings like some kind of uniform she hadn't asked for. She showered until the water ran cold, trying to wash away the anxiety crawling under her skin. It didn't work. Nothing worked. By the time she was dressed and standing in front of the bathroom mirror, applying makeup with shaking hands, she looked exactly like what she was, a girl pretending to belong somewhere she didn't. The bruise on her jaw had faded to a sickly yellow-green. She covered it as best she could, but it still showed through if the light hit it wrong. A reminder, like she needed another one. The L train was packed with commuters, all of them looking half dead and running on coffee. Lyra wedged herself between a man in a rumpled suit and a woman scrolling through her phone and tried not to think about how her entire life had been hijacked in less than a week. Tried not to think about Cassian's hands on the steering wheel, his voice in her ear. "You're mine to protect now." She wasn't his, wouldn't be his. This was just a job. A good job. The kind of opportunity people spent years working toward, and she'd stumbled into it because a dangerous man had decided she was worth saving. The thought made her want to scream. Moretti Holdings looked even more intimidating in the Monday morning light. Glass and steel and people in expensive suits flooding through the revolving doors like soldiers reporting for duty. Lara followed them in, feeling like an imposter, like any second someone would point at her and yell that she didn't belong. But the security guard just nodded when she gave her name. The receptionist smiled and handed her a visitor badge. The elevator carried her up to the 47th floor without incident. Margaret Chen was waiting in the lobby with a folder and a coffee. "Good morning, Lyra. Welcome to your first day." She handed over the coffee. Black, no sugar. Somehow exactly how Lyra took it, even though she'd never said. "We'll start with orientation, then I'll introduce you to the team." "Thank you." Lyra took the coffee, grateful to have something to do with her hands. "You look nervous." "I am nervous." Margaret's smile was genuine. "Good. Means you care. The ones who aren't nervous are the ones who don't last." She started walking, and Lyra followed, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Financial analysis isn't glamorous, but it's essential. You'll be working with raw data, profit margins, market trends, investment portfolios. Your job is to find patterns, identify risks, and present recommendations. Think you can handle that? I can try. That's all I ask. The day passed in a blur of faces and names. Lyra knew she wouldn't remember. Conference rooms that all looked identical, and more paperwork than should be legal. Employee handbook, tax forms, non-disclosure agreements that were so thick they could have been novels. She signed everything without reading it too closely, which was probably stupid, but her brain was already overloaded. She didn't see Cassian once. Part of her was relieved. Part of her kept looking over her shoulder, expecting him to materialize out of thin air like he had in that alley. But the 47th floor was all glass offices and busy analysts who barely looked up from their screens when she passed. Normal. Professional. Nothing like the dark promises and whispered confessions from the restaurant. Maybe she'd imagined how dangerous he was. Maybe the articles she'd read were just rumors, the kind of thing reporters wrote when they couldn't prove anything but needed to fill column inches. Maybe. By 5 o'clock, Lyra's head was spinning and her feet hurt almost as bad as they had after shifts at Velvet Saint. Margaret walked her to the elevator, still smiling that warm professional smile. "You did well today. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start the real work." This wasn't the real work? This was orientation. Tomorrow we throw you into the deep end. Fantastic. Lyra made it halfway across the lobby before her phone buzzed. "How was your first day?" She stopped walking, stared at the screen. Cassian's name glowing like a brand. Fine, she typed back. Just fine? I survived. That's not the same as fine. She almost put her phone away, almost ignored him and went home to collapse into bed. But something made her fingers keep moving. Where were you? Meetings. Did you need me? No. Liar. Her jaw clenched. I'm going home. Have dinner with me first. I can't. I'm exhausted. Tomorrow then. Cassian, say yes, Lyra. You know you want to. The presumption of it should have made her furious, should have made her tell him to go to hell and leave her alone. Instead, she found herself typing, one dinner, that's it, for now. She shoved her phone into her purse and walked out into the cold Chicago evening, wondering when exactly she'd lost control of her own life. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange double existence that left Lyra feeling like she was living two separate lives that shouldn't touch, but kept bleeding into each other anyway. During the day, she was a financial analyst at Moretti Holdings, sitting in meetings, analyzing spreadsheets, learning the rhythms of legitimate business. At night, she still worked at Velvet Saint because she couldn't bring herself to quit, couldn't quite trust that this new life was real. And through it all, Cassian orbited her like a dark star she couldn't escape. Dinner on Tuesday, coffee on Thursday. A late lunch the following week when she'd mentioned being hungry, and he'd appeared at her desk like he'd been waiting for the opportunity. Every interaction felt like a test she didn't know how to pass. He never pushed, never demanded, just existed in her space with that unsettling calm, watching her with eyes that saw too much. The gifts started arriving at her apartment during the second week. First, a new winter coat, designer, cashmere, the kind of things she'd never buy herself. She almost sent it back. Almost. But Chicago was brutal in February, and her old coat had a broken zipper she'd been meaning to fix for months. Then shoes. Heels that actually fit, that didn't make her feet scream after 8 hours. A leather handbag that probably cost more than her first car. Earrings. A watch. Small things, expensive things. Each one arriving without explanation, without a card, like they were facts of nature rather than choices he was making. Lyra knew she should refuse them, knew accepting meant something she wasn't ready to admit. But she was so tired of struggling, so tired of counting pennies and making do with broken things. So she kept the gifts and told herself it didn't mean anything. The third week, she finally quit Velvet Saint. It happened on a Wednesday night when a drunk investment banker grabbed her ass hard enough to bruise, and her manager told her to smile through it because guys like that tipped well. Something inside her snapped. She ripped off her apron, threw it at his feet, and walked out without looking back. She was halfway home before the panic set in. What had she done? The salary from Moretti Holdings hadn't hit her account yet. First paycheck was still a week away. She had maybe $200 to her name. If this new job fell through, if Cassian changed his mind, if any of this turned out to be too good to be true, she was screwed. Her phone rang at 11:30. Cassian's name on the screen. How did you know? She asked instead of hello. Know what? That I quit. A pause. Then, are you okay? I asked you a question. I have people who keep me informed. You're having me followed? I'm making sure you're safe. That's the same thing. No. His voice was hard now, sharp. It's not. Being followed means someone's watching your every move. Being protected means I know if you're in danger. There's a difference. I don't want your protection. Too bad. You have it anyway. She almost hung up. Should have hung up. But her hands were shaking, and she was standing on a dark street corner, and despite everything, hearing his voice made her feel less alone. He grabbed me, she said quietly. Some asshole in a suit grabbed me like I was property, and my boss told me to deal with it. So I left. Give me his name. Cassian. Give me his name, Lyra. No. Why not? Because I know what you'll do. And what will I do? Something that'll make him disappear. Something violent. Something I'll have to live with, knowing I caused. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long she thought he'd hung up. Then, come to my place. What? You're upset. You're alone. Come to my place. I'll make you dinner. We'll talk. Nothing else. I promise. I don't know where you live. I'll send a car. Cassian, please. The word hit different coming from him. Not an order, not a demand, just a request, raw and honest in a way that made her chest ache. Okay, she heard herself say. But just to talk. Just to talk. The car arrived 15 minutes later. Black. Expensive. A driver in a suit who opened the door for her like she was someone important. They drove north along the lake, past neighborhoods that got nicer and nicer until they reached a building that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. Doorman, marble lobby, an elevator that required a key card to access the penthouse level. Of course, Cassian lived in a penthouse. The doors opened directly into his apartment, not a hallway, not a landing, just straight into a space that took up the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Furniture that was somehow both expensive and comfortable. Art on the walls that she recognized from museums. Everything perfect. Everything controlled. Cassian was in the kitchen, standing at a stove in jeans and a black t-shirt that showed off arms she hadn't realized were that muscled. No suit, no tie. Just him, cooking something that smelled incredible, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. "You cook?" she said, because she had to say something. "I live alone. It was either learn or starve. You could have hired a chef." "I could have, didn't want to." He plated whatever he'd been making, pasta, vegetables, something with garlic that made her stomach growl, and carried it to the dining table. They ate in silence for a while, the city lights spreading out below them like scattered jewels. "Why did you really bring me here?" Lyra asked finally. Cassian set down his fork. "Because you sounded scared on the phone. I'm not scared of you." "I know, you're scared of this." He gestured between them. "Of what's happening. Of what it means. Nothing's happening. Lyra, we're not dating. We're not anything. You're just someone who helped me. That's all." "Is that what you tell yourself?" "It's the truth." He stood up, walked to the windows, stared out at the lake. "I've spent my entire life building walls, keeping people at a distance. It's safer that way. Cleaner. No attachments means no weaknesses. No one can hurt you if you don't let them close enough to matter." "Then why am I here?" He turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Because you got through the walls without even trying. Because I saw you at that club 3 months ago, and something inside me recognized something inside you, like calling to like. And I've tried to walk away, tried to leave you alone. But I can't." "You have to." "Why?" "Because I read about you, Cassian. I know what you are, what your family is, and I won't be part of that world. I'm not asking you to be. Aren't you? Every gift, every dinner, every time you insert yourself into my life. What do you think this is leading to?" He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I think it's leading to something real, something that scares the hell out of both of us, but just because it's frightening doesn't mean it's wrong. How do I know you won't hurt me? You don't. Just like I don't know you won't destroy me. That's the risk. That's what makes it real." His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers traced the faded bruise on her jaw, the touch so gentle it made her want to cry. "I would burn this city to the ground before I let anyone hurt you again," he said quietly. "And that should terrify you. But it doesn't, does it?" It wasn't a question. Lyra's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "No." "Why not?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do." She did. She knew exactly why. Because despite everything, despite the danger, despite the warnings, despite every logical reason to run, she felt safer with him than she had with anyone in her entire life. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. "I should go," she whispered. "Stay." "Cassian." "Stay. Just tonight. Sleep in the guest room. Let me make you breakfast in the morning. Let me prove that I can give you something good without asking for anything in return." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to walk out that door and never look back, but she was so tired of fighting, so tired of being alone. "Just tonight," she said. "Just tonight." He showed her to the guest room, which was bigger than her entire apartment, and left her with a t-shirt to sleep in and a promise that he wouldn't disturb her. Lyra locked the door anyway, then sat on the edge of the bed and tried to understand what the hell she was doing. She should leave, should call a cab right now and go home. But the bed was soft. The room was warm. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt like she could breathe. She slept better than she had in months. The real trouble started a week later. Lyra was at her desk, working through a portfolio analysis that was due by end of day, when Marcus Chen, one of the senior analysts, stopped by her cubicle. He was good-looking in a generic way, with styled hair and a smile that probably worked on most women. It didn't work on her. "Lunch?" he asked, leaning against her desk like he owned it. "Busy." "Come on. Everyone's going to that Italian place on Madison. You should come." "I really can't. This analysis will still be there when you get back. You've been here 3 weeks and haven't socialized with anyone. People are starting to think you're unfriendly." Lyra looked up at him, irritation sparking. "Or maybe I'm just trying to do my job." "All work and no play, Lyra. You know what they say." "No, Marcus. What do they say?" His smile faltered. "Just trying to be friendly? Then be friendly to someone who wants it." He walked away and Lyra turned back to her screen, already dismissing the interaction, but she felt eyes on her. When she glanced up, half the office was staring, whispering. She caught fragments of conversation. "Thinks she's too good. Moretti's favorite. Probably sleeping with him." Her stomach dropped. So that's what they thought. That she'd fucked her way into this job. That she was some kind of mistress playing pretend at being an analyst. Heat flooded her face, anger and shame mixing into something toxic. She made it through the rest of the day on autopilot, doing her work with mechanical precision while the whispers followed her everywhere. By 5 o'clock, she wanted to scream. Wanted to stand up and tell them all to go to hell, that she'd earned this position, that she was good at what she did. But she hadn't earned it. Not really. Cassian had arranged the interview, had probably told Margaret to hire her, and now everyone knew it. She was halfway to the elevator when she heard his voice. "Lyra." She turned. Cassian stood in the hallway outside his office, an office she'd never been inside, never even walked past, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Can we talk?" "Not now." "It's important." "I said not now." She hit the elevator button harder than necessary. He walked over anyway, standing too close, his presence filling the space around her. "What happened?" he asked quietly. "Nothing." "Don't lie to me." "Everyone thinks I'm sleeping with you. That's what happened. They think I'm here because I'm warming your bed, not because I'm qualified." His jaw tightened. "Who said that?" "Does it matter? They're not wrong, are they? You're here because Margaret saw your potential. I'm here because you arranged it, because you decided I needed saving and took over my life without asking, and now I have to live with people thinking I'm your whore." The word hung between them, ugly and raw. Cassian's eyes went dark, something dangerous flickering in their depths. No one thinks that. Everyone thinks that. And the worst part is, I can't even deny it, can I? Because we're, whatever this is, because I stayed at your apartment, because I keep taking your gifts and your protection and letting you rewrite my life like you own me. I don't own you. Don't you? The elevator doors opened. Lyra stepped inside, but Cassian followed, hitting the stop button before the doors could close. They were alone in the small space, the city frozen around them. "I have never treated you like property," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Everything I've done has been to help you, to give you opportunities you deserved." "I didn't ask for your help." "No, you just accepted it. Every time. The rent, the job, the gifts. You took them all, Lyra. So don't stand there and pretend you're some victim in this." The accusation stung because it was true. She had accepted everything, had let him buy her coat and her shoes and her future without putting up much of a fight. "Then I'll give it all back," she said, her voice shaking. "The apartment, the job, everything. I'll go back to Velvet Saint and my shitty studio and being broke all the time. At least then I'll know it's mine." "You can't go back to Velvet Saint. You quit." "I'll find something else. Running away won't change what's between us." "There's nothing between us." Liar. He was too close now. Close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes, could feel the heat radiating off his body. Close enough that when he reached up and cupped her face, she couldn't make herself pull away. "I'm falling for you," he said quietly, "and it's destroying every carefully built piece of my life. But I can't stop. Won't stop. So either tell me right now that you feel nothing, that this is all in my head, or stop running and admit the truth. What truth? That you're falling too. Lyra's breath caught. She wanted to deny it, wanted to push him away and tell him he was delusional. But the words wouldn't come, because he was right. She was falling. Had been falling since that night in the alley, maybe before. Falling towards something that would either save her or shatter her into pieces too small to put back together. I can't do this, she whispered. Why not? Because I don't know how to be with someone like you. I don't know how to live in your world. Then don't. Live in ours. We'll build something new, something that belongs to both of us. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying and complicated and probably a mistake, but it's real, and I'm tired of pretending it's not. He kissed her then, and Lyra's world tilted sideways. His mouth was demanding, hungry, like he'd been holding back for weeks and couldn't anymore. She should have pushed him away, should have remembered where they were, what this meant. Instead, she kissed him back just as desperately, her hands fisting in his shirt, every rational thought dissolving into heat and need. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cassian rested his forehead against hers. Say yes, he murmured. Say you're mine. This is insane. I know. Say it anyway. The elevator lurched, the stop button releasing as someone called it from another floor. They sprang apart just as the doors opened, revealing Margaret Chen standing in the lobby, her eyebrows raised. Working late, Mr. Moretti? Something like that. His voice was perfectly steady, no hint of what had just happened. Good night, Margaret. Good night. You too, Lyra. Lyra barely managed a nod before fleeing across the lobby and out into the cold. Her lips still tingled, her heart still raced, and she had no idea what the hell she was supposed to do now. Her phone buzzed 3 blocks later. That wasn't how I wanted that to happen. She almost didn't respond, almost put her phone away and pretended the last 10 minutes hadn't existed. But her fingers moved on their own. What did you want to happen? Dinner. Conversation. A chance to do this properly. Not some desperate moment in an elevator where I lost control. You're always in control. Not with you. Never with you. Lyra stopped walking, read the message again, read it a 3rd time, trying to find the lie, the manipulation. But it read like truth, raw and honest in a way that made her chest ache. I need time, she typed. How much? I don't know. Take all the time you need. But Lyra, we're not done. Not even close. She put her phone away and walked the rest of the way to the L station, her mind spinning. He'd kissed her. She'd kissed him back. And now there was no pretending anymore, no hiding behind excuses about gratitude or obligation. This was real, and that scared her more than anything. The next week passed in a fog of tension and avoidance. Lyra threw herself into work, staying late at the office, losing herself in spreadsheets and market analyses. She was good at it, she realized, better than she'd expected. Margaret had started giving her more complex projects, trusting her with client portfolios worth millions. She didn't see Cassian once, didn't answer his texts, didn't go to his office, just buried herself in work and pretended her lips didn't still remember the taste of his mouth, the desperate way he'd kissed her like she was oxygen and he was drowning. Then Friday afternoon, her world imploded. She was in the break room making coffee that was more caffeine than liquid at this point, when Marcus appeared beside her. Lyra, can we talk? I'm busy. It'll just take a minute. She turned to look at him, irritation spiking. What, Marcus? I wanted to apologize for the other day. I was pushy and I shouldn't have been. He actually looked sorry, his expression sheepish. And I wanted to warn you. Warn me about what? He glanced around, making sure they were alone. There's an FBI agent who's been asking questions. About Moretti Holdings. About Mr. Moretti specifically. Lyra's stomach dropped. What kind of questions? The kind that suggests they're building a case. Organized crime stuff, money laundering, the works. He lowered his voice. Look, I don't know what your relationship with the boss is, and I don't care. But people are talking, and if the feds are involved, anyone associated with him could get caught in the crossfire. Why are you telling me this? Because despite what you think, I'm not an asshole. And you seem like someone who didn't sign up for this kind of trouble." He walked away, leaving Lyra standing there with her coffee forgotten, her hands shaking. FBI. Investigation. The words echoed in her head like gunshots. She made it back to her desk on autopilot, her mind racing. She should have known, should have expected this. Men like Cassian didn't build empires without attracting attention, without making enemies. And now she was tangled up in it, her name probably in some federal file, marked as an associate or a witness or worse. Her phone buzzed. "I need to see you, tonight. It's urgent." Cassian's message. Lyra stared at it, her heart hammering. He knew, had to know. The FBI didn't investigate people quietly. "I can't," she typed back. "Lyra, please, this isn't a request. I said I can't, then I'm coming to you." "No." But he'd already stopped responding. Lyra shoved her phone in her purse and grabbed her coat. She needed to think, needed to figure out what the hell to do before everything collapsed. She left the building at a near run, not caring that it was only 4 o'clock, not caring about the analysis she'd left unfinished on her desk. She made it to the L station before someone grabbed her arm, not roughly, not violently, but firmly enough that she couldn't pull away. Lyra spun, heart in her throat, expecting Cassian or maybe those men from the alley. Instead, she found herself staring at a man in his 40s wearing a gray suit and a badge clipped to his belt. "Lyra Vale, I'm Detective Nathan Graves, FBI Organized Crime Division. I need you to come with me." What? "We need to talk about Cassian Moretti." His grip on her arm didn't loosen. "And about what kind of man you've really gotten involved with." Lyra's vision swam. This wasn't happening, couldn't be happening. But the detective was already guiding her toward an unmarked car parked at the curb, and she was too shocked to resist. "Am I under arrest?" she managed. "Not yet, but that depends entirely on what you tell me in the next hour." He opened the back door of the car. Lyra looked at it, then back at the detective, then at the street where people walked past without noticing, without caring. "Get in, Miss Vale, before you make this worse for both of us." She got in. The car pulled away from the curb, carrying her toward something she couldn't see but could feel waiting in the dark. Something that would change everything. Something that would force her to choose between the life she'd started to build and the man who'd built it for her. And she had no idea which choice would destroy her faster. Well, the FBI field office was exactly what she'd expected from watching too many crime shows. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, the smell of old coffee, and institutional despair. Detective Graves led her through a maze of cubicles to a small conference room with a table, 3 chairs, and a window that looked out over nothing interesting. "Sit," he said, not unkindly. Lyra sat. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to press them flat against the table to hide it. Graves settled across from her, opening a folder thick with papers and photographs. He slid one across the table. Cassian, shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit at some charity event. "Recognize him? That's my boss." "He's more than that, isn't he?" "I work at Moretti Holdings. That makes him my boss." Graves smiled, but it wasn't warm. "We've been watching you, Miss Vale. We know about the dinners, the gifts, the night you spent at his penthouse. So let's not waste time pretending this is just a professional relationship." Heat flooded her face. "I'm not discussing my personal life with you. Even if it might keep you out of prison?" The word hung in the air like a bomb. Lyra's throat went dry. "I haven't done anything illegal." "Maybe not, but Cassian Moretti has. And anyone close to him becomes an accessory." He pulled out more photographs. Cassian getting into a car with men Lyra didn't recognize. Cassian at what looked like a warehouse at night. Cassian standing in an alley, not the alley where they'd met, somewhere else, talking to someone whose face was hidden in shadow. "Do you know what your boyfriend really does?" Graves asked. "Beyond the real estate and the investments?" "He's not my boyfriend." "What is he then?" Lyra didn't answer, couldn't answer, because she didn't know. Didn't know what Cassian was to her, or what she was to him beyond this desperate, terrifying thing that had grown between them like something wild and dangerous. Graves took her silence as an opportunity. He pulled out another photograph and laid it on the table with the kind of care reserved for loaded weapons. Her name was Sofia Reyes, 26 years old, worked as a paralegal downtown. 5 years ago, she started dating Cassian Moretti. He tapped the photo. And then she disappeared. Lyra's blood turned to ice. The woman in the photograph looked eerily similar to her. Same dark hair, same build, same kind of face. Pretty, but not glamorous. Girl next door rather than magazine cover. "What happened to her?" Lyra whispered. "That's what we'd like to know." "She vanished without a trace. No body, no evidence. Just gone. And the last person seen with her was Cassian Moretti." "He wouldn't what? Kill her?" "How do you know, Miss Vale? Because he's been nice to you? Because he pays your rent and gives you expensive gifts? Sophia probably thought the same thing." Lyra stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "I want a lawyer." "You're not under arrest. You can leave whenever you want." Graves leaned back, studying her with eyes that had seen too much. "But before you do, ask yourself this. Do you really know the man you're defending? Do you know what he's capable of? What his family is capable of?" His family. The Moretti family has been connected to organized crime in Chicago for 4 generations. Extortion, money laundering, murder. They're very good at not leaving evidence, very good at making problems disappear. And right now, Miss Vale, you're a problem. A witness who could testify about his operations, about his finances, about everything we need to finally take him down. I don't know anything about his operations. You work in his financial department. You've had access to client portfolios, investment records, transactions that probably don't stand up to scrutiny. Even if you didn't realize what you were seeing, you saw it, and that makes you valuable. Lyra backed toward the door, her heart racing. I'm not testifying against anyone. Not even to save yourself? From what? You said I'm not under arrest. Not yet, but we're building a case, and when it comes together, everyone close to Moretti will fall with him. That's how RICO works, Miss Vale. You take down the whole organization, not just the head. So you have a choice. Cooperate with us now. Tell us what you know, and walk away clean. Or stay loyal to a man who'll throw you to the wolves the second it serves him. You don't know him. And you do? She didn't. That was the terrifying truth. She didn't know Cassian at all. Didn't know what he did when she wasn't around, what darkness he carried, what sins he'd committed in the name of protecting his empire. But she knew how he made her feel, knew the way he looked at her like she mattered more than anything, knew that when she was with him, the world felt less cold, less sharp, less impossible to survive. And she knew that if she walked out of this room and straight to him with questions, he'd tell her the truth. Whether that truth would save her or destroy her remained to be seen. I'm leaving, she said. Graves stood. My card. He held it out. When you realize who he really is, call me, before it's too late. Lyra took the card because refusing seemed stupider than accepting. Then she walked out of that conference room, through the maze of cubicles and out into the cold evening air. Her phone had 17 missed calls from Cassian. She didn't call him back. Instead, she took the L home, climbed the stairs to her apartment, locked the door twice, and sat on her bed staring at 3 things. Detective Graves' business card, Cassian's contact information in her phone, and the photograph she'd stolen from the FBI file when Graves wasn't looking. Sophia Reyes. Disappeared. Last seen with Cassian Moretti. The woman looked so much like her it was uncanny. Lyra's phone rang. Cassian's name. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. On the 4th call, she answered. Where are you? His voice was tight with something that might have been panic if she didn't know better. I've been trying to reach you for hours. I know. Are you okay? No. A pause. What happened? The FBI picked me up outside the L station. Detective Nathan Graves. He showed me pictures, Cassian, of you, of your business associates, of a woman who disappeared 5 years ago. The silence on the other end lasted so long she thought he'd hung up. Then, Sophia. You know her name? Yes. What happened to her? Not over the phone. Where are you? Home. I'm coming over. No, I'm already in my car. Either you let me in when I get there or I'll stand outside your door all night. Your choice. He hung up. Lyra sat there holding her silent phone, feeling like the walls were closing in. She should leave. Should pack a bag and disappear before Cassian arrived, before whatever came next swallowed her whole. But she didn't move. Just sat on her bed waiting for the knock on the door that would force her to choose between safety and truth. The knock came 20 minutes later. Lyra opened the door to find Cassian standing in the hallway, looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. His hair was messy, like he'd been running his hands through it. His tie was loose, and his eyes held something she'd never seen before. Fear. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. He walked into her tiny apartment and looked around like he was seeing it for the first time. The worn furniture, the cracks in the walls, the life she'd been living before he'd torn through it like a hurricane. "I didn't kill her," he said without preamble. "Sophia, I didn't kill her. The FBI thinks you did. The FBI thinks a lot of things they can't prove. Then where is she?" Cassian turned to face her, and the expression on his face was so raw it hurt to look at. "I helped her disappear. Gave her money, a new identity, set her up somewhere safe where my world couldn't touch her." "Why?" "Because she was in danger. Because someone found out we were together and decided she was a weakness they could exploit. Because I cared about her enough to let her go rather than watch her die." Lyra's hands were shaking again. "And you think the same thing might happen to me?" "I know it will. The moment my enemies realize you matter to me, you become a target. The moment the FBI realizes your leverage, you become a pawn. Either way, you lose. And his voice cracked, "I can't watch that happen again." "Then why didn't you stay away from me?" "Because I tried. I tried to ignore you, tried to forget you existed, but you got under my skin and I couldn't let go. And now I've done exactly what I swore I wouldn't do, put you in danger by wanting you." The confession hung between them, heavy and impossible. "Tell me the truth," Lyra said quietly. "All of it. What your family really does, what you really do. I need to know what I'm defending." Cassian moved to her window, staring out at the city lights. When he spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reciting facts that didn't belong to him. "My great-grandfather came to Chicago with nothing. Built a business through hard work and harder choices. My grandfather expanded it. My father consolidated it. And I inherited an empire built on violence and fear. We run operations the law doesn't touch, protection rackets, certain import businesses, influence in places that matter. We're not the Mafia from the movies. We don't wear pinstripe suits and speak in code. We're businessmen who happen to operate outside the legal framework when it suits us. That's still crime. Yes. And you've never tried to walk away? Where would I walk to? This is all I know, all I was raised to be." He turned to look at her. "Until you. Until I met someone who made me want to be something different." "I can't fix you, Cassian. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to decide if you can live with who I am, not who I might become. Not some sanitized version you're hoping will emerge, but me. Exactly as I am right now." Lyra's heart was hammering. "And if I can't, then I'll do what I should have done from the beginning. I'll disappear from your life. Make sure you're safe. Make sure you keep the job, keep your apartment, keep everything I've given you, but we'll never see each other again." "You'd really walk away? If it keeps you alive?" Yes. She believed him, could see it in his eyes, in the set of his shoulders. He'd give her up to keep her safe, even if it destroyed him. And somehow that made everything worse, because she didn't want him to walk away. Didn't want to go back to a life without him, even knowing what he was, what he'd done. "I don't want you to leave," she whispered. "Then what do you want?" "I want you to be honest with me. Always. Even when the truth is ugly. Even when it scares me. No more secrets. No more protecting me from reality." "Lyra, that's my condition. Complete honesty. Or we end this right now." Cassian crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. She felt his heart racing against her chest, felt his breath in her hair. "Okay," he said against her temple. "No more secrets." She pulled back just enough to look at him. "I'm terrified. So am I. What if this destroys us? Then we burn together." He kissed her, and this time it wasn't desperate or frantic. It was deliberate. A promise. A choice they were both making with eyes wide open, knowing exactly how badly this could end. When they finally broke apart, Lyra rested her forehead against his chest and tried to catch her breath. "The FBI will come after you again," Cassian said quietly. "Graves is persistent. He'll try to use you against me. I won't cooperate." He'll threaten you, promise immunity, paint me as a monster. Are you? A monster? The question sat heavy between them. Cassian's arms tightened around her. Sometimes, when I have to be, to protect what's mine. And what's yours? You. You're mine now. And anyone who tries to hurt you will learn exactly what kind of monster I can be. It should have scared her, should have sent her running. Instead, Lyra felt something dark and dangerous unfurl in her chest, something that recognized the violence in his voice and didn't flinch from it. Stay tonight, she said. Are you sure? No, but stay anyway. They moved to her bed, too small, the mattress lumpy, and lay in the dark holding each other while Chicago hummed outside her window. Cassian's breathing eventually evened out, but Lyra stayed awake staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the choice she'd just made. She'd chosen him, chosen danger over safety, chosen a man whose world was built on violence and secrets over the clean, simple life she'd imagined for herself. And somewhere in the darkness, Detective Graves was probably making plans to use that choice against her. Somewhere in the city, Cassian's enemies were watching, waiting for an opportunity. Somewhere, a clock was ticking down toward the moment when everything would explode. But for now, she had this moment, this man, this fragile, terrifying thing they were building together. Lyra pressed closer to Cassian's warmth and closed her eyes. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, even if it killed them both. Morning came too fast and felt wrong from the start. Lyra woke to find Cassian already awake, sitting on the edge of her bed with his phone pressed to his ear. His voice low and harsh in a language she didn't recognize. Italian, maybe. Or something older, something that belonged to rooms she'd never enter and conversations she'd never understand. He noticed her watching and ended the call abruptly. What's wrong? She asked, her throat dry. Nothing you need to worry about. Cassian, I have to go. Business. He stood, already reaching for his jacket. The walls were back up, that careful control sliding into place like armor. Stay home today. Don't go to the office. Why not? Because I'm asking you to. That's not an answer. His jaw tightened. There are things happening right now that I need to handle. Things I don't want you anywhere near, so please, for once, just trust me and stay here. You promised no more secrets. This isn't a secret. It's a precaution. He leaned down, kissed her forehead with a gentleness that felt like goodbye. I'll call you later. Lock the door behind me. Then he was gone, and Lyra was left sitting in her rumpled bed, staring at the space where he'd been, feeling the first creeping tendrils of unease wrap around her chest. She tried to go back to sleep. Couldn't. Tried to distract herself with coffee and television. Nothing worked. By 10 o'clock, the walls of her apartment felt like they were closing in, and Cassian still hadn't called. Her phone buzzed at 10:30. Not Cassian. Margaret Chen. Are you coming in today? We have the portfolio review at noon. Lyra stared at the message. She'd forgotten about the review. A major client meeting where she was supposed to present her analysis of their investment strategy. Missing it would look unprofessional. Worse, it would look like she was getting special treatment because of her relationship with Cassian. Be there in an hour, she typed back. She shouldn't go. Cassian had explicitly told her to stay home, but he'd also promised honesty, and showing up for work wasn't dangerous. It was her job. The job he'd gotten her, but still, hers. The L train was crowded with the usual mid-morning rush of people who worked shifts that didn't start at 9. Lyra wedged herself into a corner and tried Cassian's number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again, same result. The unease in her chest tightened into something closer to fear. Moretti Holdings looked normal when she arrived. Same gleaming lobby, same security guard nodding as she passed, same elevator carrying her up to the 47th floor where everything was glass and chrome and people moving with purpose. But something felt off. The office was too quiet. People were clustered in small groups, whispering, their faces tight with tension. When Lyra walked past, they stopped talking and watched her with expressions she couldn't read. Lyra! Marcus appeared at her elbow, his face pale. You shouldn't be here. I have the portfolio review. It's been canceled. Everything's been canceled. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward an empty conference room. The feds raided 3 of our locations this morning. They're seizing records, freezing accounts, taking people in for questioning. It's a full-scale operation. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. What? They're shutting us down. Or trying to. Legal's in full crisis mode. Half the executive team is already lawyered up, and Moretti, he lowered his voice. No one knows where he is. Lyra's phone felt like lead in her hand. She'd tried calling him twice, straight to voicemail both times, because he'd been dealing with this, because while she'd been riding the train downtown, his entire world had been collapsing. I need to find him. Are you insane? The last thing you want right now is to be connected to him any more than you already are. The feds are probably building a case against everyone in this building. I don't care. You should care. Lyra, listen to me. Whatever you think you have with Moretti, it's not worth going to prison for. Walk away while you still can. But she was already moving, pushing past him, heading for the elevator. She had to find Cassian, had to know he was okay, had to… Miss Vale. Detective Graves stepped out of Cassian's office, flanked by 2 other agents and FBI windbreakers. He looked tired but satisfied, like a man who'd been chasing something for years and finally caught it. We need to talk, he said. I have nothing to say to you. That's unfortunate, because we have a lot to say to you. He gestured toward Cassian's office. After you. It wasn't a request. Lyra walked into Cassian's office for the first time and found it ransacked. File cabinets open, drawers pulled out, papers scattered across the desk. They'd torn through everything, looking for evidence, looking for ammunition to use against him. Sit down, Graves said. I'll stand. Suit yourself. He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. Where's Cassian Moretti? I don't know. When did you last speak with him? This morning, at my apartment. What did he say? That's none of your business. Graves smiled that humorless smile. Everything about your relationship with Moretti is my business now. You're a person of interest in a federal investigation. That means I can make your life very difficult, or I can make it easy. Your choice. I want a lawyer. You're not under arrest. Not yet. But let me paint you a picture of where this is heading. He pulled out a folder. Thick, official-looking, the kind of thing that ended lives. We have evidence of money laundering, racketeering, and extortion spanning the last decade. We have witnesses ready to testify. We have financial records that show Moretti Holdings is a front for illegal operations. And we have you, a financial analyst who's been accessing those records for the past month. I didn't know. Doesn't matter. Ignorance isn't a defense. You signed off on transactions. You prepared reports. Your fingerprints are all over documents that prove criminal activity, which means you're either complicit or you're a victim he used to legitimize his operations. Either way, you're facing charges unless you cooperate. The room was spinning. Lyra grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself. What do you want? Information? Locations? Names? Everything you know about Moretti's operations and the people he works with. I don't know anything. Then you're useless to us, which means you'll go down with him. I haven't done anything wrong. The prosecutors will decide that. Not you. Graves stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. Lyra, I've been doing this a long time. I've seen 100 women in your position. Smart, capable women who got tangled up with dangerous men and paid the price. Some of them are in prison right now. Some of them are dead. You don't want to be either, so help me help you. By betraying him. By saving yourself. The words hung in the air like poison. Lyra wanted to tell Graves to go to hell, wanted to walk out of this office and never look back. But the fear was real now, cold and sharp in her chest. She'd touched those files, signed those reports, put her name on documents she hadn't fully understood because she'd been so focused on proving herself, on being good at the job Cassian had given her. I need to think, she whispered. You have 24 hours. After that, we're filing charges, and you'll need a lot more than thinking to save yourself. He handed her a card, the same card he'd given her before. Call me when you're ready to be smart about this. They left her standing in the wreckage of Cassian's office, alone with the weight of choices she'd never wanted to make. Her phone rang. Finally. Cassian's name on the screen. She answered with shaking hands. Where are you? Somewhere safe. Are you at the office? Yes. The FBI. I know. Get out of there. Now. Go home, pack a bag, and wait for me to call you back. Cassian, they're saying I'm going to be charged. They're saying I was part of… You weren't part of anything. I made sure of that. Every document you touched was legitimate. Every transaction was legal. They're bluffing because they want you scared. Well, it's working. Lyra, listen to me. His voice was hard now, commanding. Do not talk to them. Do not give them anything. I will fix this. I will protect you. But you have to trust me. How? How are you going to fix this when they have evidence, when they have witnesses? The same way I've handled everything else, by being smarter than they are. A pause. Do you trust me? She wanted to, needed to. But standing in his destroyed office with federal agents probably listening to this call, trust felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. I don't know, she said honestly. The silence on the other end lasted too long. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder, more distant. Then there's nothing more to say. Goodbye, Lyra. He hung up. She stared at her phone, disbelief turning to panic. He'd just... what? Given up on her? Walked away because she'd admitted doubt? After everything, after the promises and the confessions and the nights spent holding each other, he was just done? Unless he was protecting her, cutting ties publicly so the FBI couldn't use their relationship against him, making it look like she meant nothing so they'd leave her alone. Or maybe he really was done. Maybe when it came down to it, she was just another Sophia Reyes, a problem to be disappeared, a weakness to be eliminated. Lyra's legs gave out. She sank into Cassian's chair, his chair, still holding the shape of him, and pressed her hands against her eyes. This was insane. All of it. 1 week ago, her biggest problem had been making rent. Now she was facing federal charges, and the man she'd started to fall for had just cut her loose like she was nothing. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Parking garage. Level B3. Black sedan. Get in. Now. She should ignore it, should call Detective Graves and tell him someone was trying to contact her, should do the smart, safe, legal thing. Instead, she stood up, walked out of that office, and took the elevator down to the parking garage. The black sedan was exactly where the text said it would be. Windows tinted, engine running. She couldn't see who was inside. Lyra opened the back door and slid in. The man sitting across from her wasn't Cassian. He was older, 60s maybe, with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite, expensive suit, hands that rested too calmly in his lap, eyes that had seen things that would give normal people nightmares. Miss Vale? I'm Vincent Moretti, Cassian's father. The air left her lungs. She'd seen pictures of Vincent Moretti in her research, old photos from charity events, newspaper articles about business deals. But in person, he radiated power in a way that made Cassian look tame. What do you want? She managed. To talk about my son, about the unfortunate situation you found yourself in. His voice was smooth, cultured, the kind of voice that gave orders and expected obedience. You care about him? Yes. That's unfortunate. The word hit like a slap. Excuse me? Caring about my son is dangerous for you, for him, for everyone involved. Vincent leaned forward slightly. Cassian has always been soft, too emotional, too willing to let sentiment cloud his judgment. It's made him vulnerable. And now that vulnerability has a name, Livia Vale. I didn't ask for any of this. No. But you accepted it. You let him into your life, let him pay your rent, give you a job, seduce you with promises of safety and protection. And now his enemies know exactly how to hurt him. Through you. You're exactly what they've been looking for. A weakness, a pressure point, and the FBI knows it too, which is why they'll use you to destroy him unless something changes. Lyra's hands were clenched so tight, her nails cut into her palms. What do you want from me? I want you to disappear. Leave Chicago. Change your name. Start over somewhere far from here. I'll give you money. Enough to build a new life, a good life. All you have to do is walk away and never contact my son again. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, you'll both end up dead. The FBI will charge you, use your testimony to convict Cassian, and send him to prison for the rest of his life. Or his enemies will kill you to punish him for caring. Either way, you lose. This way, at least you survive. And Cassian? Will grieve. Will rage. Will eventually move on. He's stronger than you think, but only if you're not there to weaken him. The cruelty of it was staggering. Vincent Moretti was asking her to choose between saving herself and destroying the man she loved, because she did love him. Had probably loved him from that first night in the alley when he'd stepped out of the darkness and made her feel like she mattered. "No," she said. "Excuse me?" "I said no. I'm not running. I'm not disappearing. If Cassian wants me gone, he can tell me himself." Vincent's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's mine to make." "Then you're more foolish than I thought." He pulled out an envelope and set it on the seat between them. "When you change your mind, and you will, call the number inside. The offer expires in 48 hours. He knocked twice on the partition. The driver's door opened and a man in a black suit gestured for Lyra to get out. She grabbed the envelope, couldn't help herself, and climbed out of the sedan. It pulled away immediately, disappearing into the dim parking garage like it had never existed. Lyra stood there for a long moment, holding an envelope that probably contained enough money to change her life, feeling like she was standing on the edge of a cliff with no way back to solid ground. Her phone rang again. Not Cassian this time. Margaret Chen. "Lyra, where are you?" "Parking garage, why?" "Get back up here. Now. Something's happened." The fear in Margaret's voice sent Lyra running for the elevator. She burst onto the 47th floor to find chaos. People shouting, security guards everywhere, someone crying in a conference room. "What's going on?" she demanded. Margaret grabbed her arm, pulling her aside. "There's been an attack on Cassian." Everything stopped. The noise, the movement, the air in her lungs. "What? Someone tried to kill him. Gunfire at one of the warehouses on the south side. He's alive, but—" Margaret's voice cracked. "It's bad, Lyra. It's really bad." The world tilted sideways. Lyra grabbed the wall to keep from falling. "Where is he?" "Northwestern Memorial, but you can't go there. The place is crawling with police and probably FBI. If they see you, oh..." But Lyra was already moving, already running for the elevator, already not caring about consequences or federal charges or anything except getting to him. The hospital was exactly what Margaret had warned. Police cars outside, agents in the lobby, security everywhere. Lyra walked through it all like a ghost, ignoring the shouted questions, the hands that tried to stop her, the voices telling her she couldn't be there. She made it to the surgical floor before someone finally blocked her path. Not a cop. Not an agent. A man she recognized from the photos in Cassian's office. One of his people. Someone who'd been at the warehouse, whose suit was spattered with blood that probably wasn't his own. "He doesn't want to see you," the man said. "I don't care what he wants." "Miss Vale, get out of my way or I'll scream until security drags me out. Either way, I'm seeing him." The man studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Room 412, you have 5 minutes." Lyra found the room at the end of the hall, private, guarded. She pushed through the door before she could lose her nerve. Cassian was in the bed, his torso wrapped in bandages, his face pale but conscious. Alive. But the damage was written all over him. Bruises, cuts, the kind of wounds that came from violence up close and personal. "You shouldn't be here," he said when he saw her. His voice was rough, strained. "I heard what happened. And you came anyway. Even though I told you." "Ah! I don't care what you told me." She was across the room, grabbing his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin and wanting to cry from relief. "You were shot. Someone tried to kill you. I don't care about the FBI or your father or anything except the fact that you're alive." "My father talked to you." "Yes." "What did he say?" "That I should disappear. That loving you will get me killed." She met his eyes, refusing to look away. "He offered me money to leave Chicago and never see you again." Something dark and furious crossed Cassian's face. And I told him no." "Lyra, you don't get to push me away. Not now. Not after everything. I chose you. I chose this. And I'm not running just because things got hard. Things aren't hard. They're lethal. Someone put 3 bullets in me today because they wanted to send a message. Because they know hurting me means hurting you." His fingers tightened around hers, his voice dropping to something raw and desperate. "I can't protect you if you won't let me." "I don't need protection. I need you to stop treating me like I'm made of glass." "You almost went to prison today because of me." I almost lost you because someone tried to murder you. Which one of those sounds worse? He closed his eyes, exhaustion written in every line of his face. I don't know how to keep you safe. Then don't. Keep me close instead. We'll figure out the rest. That's not how this works. Then change how it works. A knock on the door. The man from the hallway stuck his head in. Boss, we have a problem. Cassian's eyes snapped open, all weakness gone in an instant. What kind of problem? The kind that's waiting in the lobby with a warrant for Miss Vale's arrest. Lyra's blood turned to ice. What? Detective Graves. He's got 2 agents with him and paperwork that says you're being charged as an accessory to money laundering and racketeering. They're coming up now. No. Cassian tried to sit up, winced, fell back against the pillows. Get her out of here. Back exit, now. Cassian, listen to me. He grabbed her hand, pulling her close enough that she could see the fear in his eyes. If they arrest you, I can't help you. Can't protect you. Can't do anything except watch while they use you to destroy me. So you need to run, right now, while you still can. Run where? Anthony will take you. He knows places they won't find you, places even my father doesn't know about. He pressed something into her palm, a key. There's a safe house. Address is on the tag. Go there. Wait for me. I'll come for you as soon as I can. What if you can't? His jaw tightened. Then you keep running. You disappear. You build a new life somewhere far from all of this. And you forget you ever knew me. I won't. Promise me. The desperation in his voice broke something in her chest. She nodded, even though they both knew it was a lie. Even though she had no intention of disappearing, of abandoning him to face this alone. I promise. Go. Now. Anthony was already at her elbow, pulling her toward a door she hadn't noticed. Service exit, probably used for equipment and staff. They moved fast, down a stairwell that smelled like disinfectant and fear, out into an alley behind the hospital where another black car was waiting. Get in, Anthony said. Lyra looked back at the hospital, at the building where Cassian was lying wounded and vulnerable, where federal agents were probably bursting into his room right now, demanding answers he wouldn't give. She got in the car. They drove in silence through neighborhoods Lyra didn't recognize, winding through side streets and alleys until they reached a building on the west side that looked abandoned from the outside but had security cameras everywhere. Anthony led her inside, up 3 flights of stairs to an apartment that was sparse but functional. You'll be safe here, he said. No one knows about this place except the boss and a few of us. Food in the fridge, cash in the bedroom closet. Phone's a burner, untraceable. Don't call anyone you knew before. Don't go outside unless you absolutely have to. Understand? How long do I have to stay here? As long as it takes. For what? Anthony's expression was grim. From ready to fix this, or for everything to fall apart, whichever comes first. He left without another word, and Lyra was alone in a strange apartment with a burner phone and the key to a life she hadn't chosen. She lasted exactly 4 hours before she broke. Not broke down, broke out. Because sitting in that apartment waiting for Cassian to save her was exactly what everyone expected. What his father wanted, what Detective Graves was probably counting on. And Lyra was done being a piece on someone else's board. She grabbed the cash from the closet, $5,000 in small bills, and the burner phone, and walked out into the Chicago night with no plan except to stop running and start fighting back. The safe house address on the key wasn't far. 20-minute walk through neighborhoods that got rougher with every block. Lyra kept her head down, her hand wrapped around the key like a weapon, and tried not to think about how completely insane this was. The building looked like a warehouse from the outside. Brick, windowless. The kind of place where bad things happened and no one asked questions. She used the key on a side door and stepped into darkness. Lights flickered on automatically, motion sensors. The space was bigger than she'd expected. Open floor plan, sleeping area in one corner, kitchenette in another. But what caught her attention was the wall, covered in photographs, documents, maps, red string connecting names and faces in patterns she didn't understand. This wasn't a safe house. This was an investigation. Lyra moved closer, her heart pounding. The photographs were surveillance shots, men in suits, buildings, license plates. The documents were financial records, wire transfers, shipping manifests. And at the center of it all was a name she recognized. Vincent Moretti. Not Cassian, his father. She started reading. Couldn't stop. Each document was worse than the last. Evidence of crimes that made the FBI's case against Cassian look tame. Murder, extortion, human trafficking, things that belonged in nightmares, not reality. Things that Vincent Moretti had orchestrated while his son ran the legitimate side of the business. And at the bottom of one file, in handwriting she recognized from signed documents at the office, was a note, collected by C. Moretti. Federal immunity agreement pending. Lyra's hands shook as she pulled the document free. Read it once, twice, 3 times, trying to make sense of words that couldn't possibly mean what they seemed to mean. Cassian had been working with the FBI, not fighting them, working with them, gathering evidence against his own father, building a case that would destroy the Moretti empire from the inside. And the immunity agreement, dated 6 months ago, meant he'd cut a deal. Testify against Vincent in exchange for walking away clean, which meant everything Cassian had told her was a lie. The danger, the protection, the desperate confessions about not being able to walk away from his family's business. All of it calculated, all of it manipulation, because he'd been planning his escape the entire time, and she'd been too stupid to see it. Or worse. Lyra's eyes fell on another document, a witness list for the federal case. Names of people who would testify. Names that included Margaret Chen, Marcus from the office, 6 people she recognized from Moretti Holdings. And at the bottom, in red ink, like a target, Livia Vale. She wasn't a victim. She was a witness. Someone Cassian had positioned perfectly, given access to documents, made sure she touched files, ensured she was connected enough to the company to have value when the time came. He'd been setting her up from the beginning. The realization hit like a physical blow. Lyra staggered backward, her legs hitting the edge of the bed, everything she'd thought she knew shattering into pieces too sharp to hold. The alley hadn't been chance. He'd admitted following her, admitted watching, had probably been waiting for the right moment to step in, to play hero, to make her grateful enough to trust him. The job hadn't been kindness. It had been placement. Putting her exactly where she needed to be to document his father's crimes while looking like an innocent caught in the crossfire. The gifts, the dinners, the nights he'd held her and promised protection. All of it had been grooming, manipulation, a calculated strategy to turn her into the perfect witness, someone personally invested, someone who could testify about the company's operations without seeming like an insider. She thought she was falling in love. She'd been falling for a trap. Lyra's phone, the burner Anthony had given her, rang. She answered without thinking. "Did you find it?" Cassian's voice. Rough from pain or drugs, but unmistakably him. "You bastard." A pause. "You're at the warehouse. You've been working with the FBI. This whole time. Everything you told me was a lie." "Not everything." "Which parts were true? The part where you said you loved me? The part where you promised to protect me? Or the part where you turned me into a federal witness without my knowledge or consent?" "Lyra, I saw the list, Cassian. My name is on the witness list. You've been setting me up since the moment we met." The silence on the other end lasted forever. When he spoke again, his voice was different, flat, empty of the emotion he'd used so effectively against her. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice." "Not in my world. Not when your father is Vincent Moretti and walking away means everyone you've ever cared about ends up dead." He exhaled slowly, painfully. "I've been trying to get out for 3 years, building evidence, documenting crimes, making sure when I finally turned on him, the case would stick. But I needed more than financial records. I needed witnesses. People who could testify about the operations without looking like criminals themselves. So you used me. So I gave you a way out, a job, a salary, distance from anything illegal. When this goes to trial, you can testify honestly that you knew nothing about the criminal side. You'll have immunity, protection, a clean record. You don't get to decide that for me. I decided it the moment I realized you were working yourself to death in that club. The moment I saw what your life had become and knew I could give you something better. By lying to me, by manipulating me, by turning me into evidence against your father without telling me. Would you have said yes if I'd asked?" Lyra opened her mouth. closed it. Because he was right. If he'd approached her in that alley and said, "I need you to spy on my father's criminal empire," she would have run, would have called the police, would have done exactly what any rational person would do. But that didn't make it okay. "You used my feelings against me," she said, her voice breaking. "I know. You made me trust you. I know. You made me love you." His breath caught on the other end of the line. When he spoke, his voice was raw. That part wasn't fake. That part was never supposed to happen. "I was just going to give you the job, keep you safe, make sure you were positioned correctly for when everything came apart. But then you were there and you were real. And you looked at me like I was someone worth saving instead of someone who deserved to burn. And I—" He stopped. Started again. "I fell in love with you. Actually fell. And it destroyed every plan I had because I couldn't use you anymore. Couldn't put you in danger. Couldn't do anything except try to protect you from a situation I'd created. I don't believe you." "I know. I wouldn't believe me either." A long pause. "The shooting today wasn't random. My father ordered it. He found out about the FBI deal, about the evidence I've been collecting, and he decided I'd become too dangerous to keep alive." Lyra's heart stopped. "Your own father tried to kill you." "My father loves power more than he loves his children. Always has. And I was about to destroy everything he'd built. So yes, he tried to kill me. And when that didn't work, he went after the next best thing. Me. The offer he made you, the money, the chance to disappear. That wasn't mercy, Lyra. That was a test. If you'd taken it, if you'd proven you were willing to walk away from me, he would have let you go. But you said no, which means you're loyal, which means you're leverage. The pieces were falling into place now, sharp and terrible. He's going to use me to get to you. He's going to try, which is why you need to stay in that warehouse. Don't leave. Don't contact anyone. I have people watching the building. You're safe as long as you stay put." "Safe?" She laughed, and it came out bitter. "I'm not safe. I've never been safe. Not since the moment you decided to make me part of your war." "I didn't decide. You chose me, Cassian. Out of everyone in that city, everyone who worked at that club, you chose me. And don't tell me it was random. Don't tell me it was fate. You saw something in me that you could use, and you used it. So whatever guilt you're feeling now, whatever regrets you have, they don't change what you did." "You're right." The words came out broken. "You're right about everything. And I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. But right now, I need you to trust me one more time. Just long enough for me to end this. To take down my father and everyone who works for him. To make sure you're safe, and then—" His voice cracked. "And then you never have to see me again." Lyra looked around the warehouse at the evidence on the walls, at the carefully constructed case against Vincent Moretti, at the red string connecting her name to people she'd never met, and crimes she hadn't known existed. "When does it happen?" she asked. "The trial. When?" 3 days. He's being arraigned Monday morning. If I can testify, if the case holds, he'll go to prison for the rest of his life. And everyone who worked for him will go down with him. And me? What happens to me? You testify. Tell them what you saw at Moretti Holdings, the files you accessed, the transactions you reviewed. It'll be easy, clean. You'll have immunity for anything you might have unknowingly participated in, and afterward you'll be free. New identity if you want it, protection if you need it. Whatever you want, the FBI will provide. Because you arranged that too. Because I couldn't live with myself if you paid for my sins." Lyra closed her eyes. 3 days until she had to stand in a courtroom and help destroy the man she loved by helping destroy his father. 3 days until this nightmare either ended or swallowed her whole. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll testify. But not for you. For every person your father has hurt. For Sophia Reyes and whoever else disappeared because they were inconvenient. For every life your family destroyed while pretending to be legitimate businessmen." "Okay. And after? After it's over and your father's in prison and you get your immunity? What about it? I never want to see you again." The silence stretched so long she thought he'd hung up. Then, "Okay." She ended the call and sat on the edge of the bed in a warehouse that smelled like old brick and secrets, holding a burner phone and a key to a life that had been built on lies. Outside, Chicago hummed with traffic and people living normal lives, unaware that somewhere in the darkness, empires were crumbling, and the woman caught in the center of it all was trying not to fall apart, Lyra lasted until midnight before the tears came. Not gentle crying, violent, body-shaking sobs that felt like they were tearing her apart from the inside. She cried for the girl she'd been 3 months ago, broke and desperate but her own. She cried for the future she'd imagined with Cassian, the one where his darkness could be softened by her light. She cried for the trust she'd given so freely, and the love that had been engineered rather than earned. And when she was done crying, when there was nothing left except emptiness and resolve, she made a decision. She wasn't going to be anyone's pawn, not Cassian's, not the FBI's, not Vincent Moretti's. She was going to survive this, and then she was going to build something real, something that belonged only to her, something no one could take away. But first, she had to make it through the next 3 days without getting killed. The burner phone rang at 2 in the morning. Unknown number. Hello? Miss Vale. A voice she didn't recognize. Male, older, dangerous. You have something that belongs to Vincent Moretti, and he'd very much like it back. I don't know what you're talking about. His son. You know where Cassian is being held. You know how to reach him. Mr. Moretti is willing to offer you a substantial sum in exchange for that information. Go to hell. Or, the voice continued as if she hadn't spoken, you can refuse and we'll come find you. We know you're in one of Cassian's safe houses. We know Anthony drove you there. It's only a matter of time before we narrow down the location. So you can make this easy or you can make it hard. But either way, Miss Vale, you will tell us what we want to know. The line went dead. Lyra sat in the darkness, her heart racing, and realized with absolute certainty that she'd just run out of time. Vincent Moretti was coming for her. And when he found her, no amount of immunity or protection or promises from Cassian would be enough to save her. She was trapped in a warehouse with evidence that could destroy a criminal empire, 3 days away from testifying in a trial that would make her a target for the rest of her life. And the only person who could protect her was the same person who'd put her in this position. The walls were closing in, and Lyra Vale had absolutely no idea how to get out alive. Lyra didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every sound in the warehouse became a threat. The creak of old pipes, the wind rattling loose siding, the hum of traffic from the street outside. She sat on the floor with her back against the wall, the burner phone in one hand and a knife she'd found in the kitchenette in the other. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. The threat had been clear. Vincent Moretti's people were coming. The only questions were when and how many. She should call Cassian, should tell him about the phone call, the threat, the fact that his father's people had tracked her to one of the safe houses. But calling him meant admitting she needed him, meant giving him another chance to play hero while she played victim. And she was done with that role. Instead, she started going through the evidence on the walls with new eyes. Not as a victim trying to understand what had happened to her life, but as someone looking for ammunition, for leverage, for anything she could use to survive the next 72 hours. The financial documents were dense, pages of wire transfers and shell companies and transactions that probably meant something to accountants and federal prosecutors, but looked like gibberish to her. But the photographs were different, clear, damning. Vincent Moretti meeting with known criminals, shaking hands with politicians who were supposed to be clean, standing outside warehouses where, according to the notes, shipments of illegal goods passed through every week. And buried in one file, she found something that made her breath catch. A photograph of Vincent Moretti standing next to a younger man outside a restaurant. The date stamp read 5 years ago. The younger man's face was partially obscured, but Lyra recognized him anyway from other photos scattered across the investigation board. Detective Nathan Graves, younger, thinner, but unmistakably him. She pulled the photo down, her hand shaking. There was a note clipped to the back in Cassian's handwriting. Graves on Moretti payroll 2019 to 2021. Payments documented. Turned witness when threatened with exposure. The FBI detective who'd been pressuring her to testify, who'd shown her pictures of Sophia Reyes and painted Cassian as a monster, who'd promised her immunity and protection. That detective had been working for Vincent Moretti. Had been dirty. Had only turned when he had no other choice, which meant he couldn't be trusted. Meant the promises he'd made about her safety were worth exactly nothing. Lyra's mind raced. If Graves was compromised, then the entire FBI investigation might be compromised. Evidence could disappear. Witnesses could be silenced. And she was sitting in a warehouse full of information that could destroy Vincent Moretti if it reached the right people. or get her killed if it reached the wrong ones. She needed to move, needed to get this evidence somewhere safe, somewhere not even Cassian knew about. The burner phone rang again. 3 in the morning now. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, almost threw the phone across the room and ran. But running without information was suicide. "What?" she answered. "You hung up on my associate earlier." Vincent Moretti's voice, calm, cultured, the voice of a man who'd never been told no in his life. "That was rude, Miss Vale. I'm not telling you where your son is. I don't need you to tell me. I already know. Northwestern Memorial, 4th floor, room 412, under guard by federal agents and 3 of his own men. What I need from you is much simpler." "I'm not interested." "You should be, because right now you're sitting in a warehouse on the west side holding evidence that my son has been collecting against me for 3 years. Evidence I would very much like to destroy. And you—" He paused, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "You're going to bring it to me. Like hell. Or I'll send my people to come get it, and you. And when they're done with you, what's left won't be enough to identify. Is that what you want, Miss Vale? To die alone in a warehouse for a man who's been using you from the start? Your son is the one who's going to testify against you, not me. My son is wounded and under federal protection. Untouchable, for now. But you're exposed, vulnerable. And the evidence you're sitting on is the only thing standing between me and freedom. So here's my offer. Bring me those files, all of them, every photograph, every document, every piece of evidence Cassian collected. In exchange, I'll let you walk away, clean, free. No one will ever bother you again." "I don't believe you." "Smart girl, but belief doesn't change reality. You have 2 hours to decide. After that, my people are coming in, and they won't be making offers." The line went dead. Lyra sat in the silence, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. 2 hours, maybe less if Vincent was lying about the timeline. She needed to move, now. She grabbed one of the boxes from under the investigation board, accordion files full of documents, and started shoving everything she could carry inside. Photographs, financial records, the note about graves being dirty. Anything that looked important went into the box. The warehouse had a back exit. She'd seen it earlier, marked with an emergency sign that probably hadn't worked in years. She made it halfway across the floor when she heard it. Footsteps. Outside. Multiple sets, moving with purpose. They'd lied about the 2 hours. Lyra ran. She hit the back door at full speed, the box clutched to her chest, and burst out into an alley that smelled like garbage and old rain. The Chicago night was freezing, her breath coming out in white clouds. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Just ran toward the street, toward lights, toward people who might help or might just watch while Vincent Moretti's people dragged her into a car and made her disappear. She made it 2 blocks before the black sedan cut her off. Not the same one from earlier. This one was bigger, heavier, the kind of vehicle built to take damage and keep moving. It screeched to a stop in front of her, blocking her path, and 2 men got out, big men, the kind who got paid to hurt people and enjoyed their work. "Miss Vale!" The first one smiled, and it was the worst thing she'd seen since the men in that alley weeks ago. "Mr. Moretti would like a word." "Tell him to call my lawyer." "That's funny. Mr. Moretti likes funny. Maybe he'll let you keep your teeth." They moved toward her, not rushing, taking their time. They had her boxed in, the sedan in front, a brick wall behind, no side streets close enough to reach. Lyra's grip tightened on the box. If they took it, if Vincent got this evidence, Cassian's entire case collapsed. 3 years of work, gone. And she'd be dead anyway. "Last chance," the first man said. "Come quietly, or we get creative." Lyra looked at the box, at the evidence, at the only leverage she had left. Then she threw it as hard as she could over the brick wall behind her. The men lunged. She twisted away, but one of them caught her arm, his grip iron and painful. She drove her elbow backward, connected with something solid, heard a grunt. But the other one was already there, his hand fisting in her hair, yanking her head back so hard her vision went white. "Stupid bitch!" The gunshot cracked through the air like thunder. The man holding her hair dropped, his grip releasing, his body hitting the pavement with a wet thud. Lyra stumbled forward, her scalp burning, her ears ringing. The second man was reaching for his gun when another shot took him in the chest. both men down, both bleeding, both very dead. Lyra spun, looking for the shooter, and found Anthony standing at the mouth of the alley with a pistol still raised. "Get in the car," he said. "Now." She didn't argue, just ran to the black car that had appeared behind him, different from the one Vincent's men had been driving, and threw herself into the back seat. Anthony slid into the driver's seat, and they were moving before she'd even closed the door. "How did you—" "Boss had me watching the warehouse. Good thing, too. Vincent's people have been circling for the last hour." He took a corner too fast, tires squealing. "Where's the evidence?" "I threw it over a wall 2 blocks back." "Jesus Christ, that's what you threw?" "That's the entire case." "They were going to take it. I didn't have a choice." Anthony swore in Italian, something vicious and creative, and whipped the car around. They raced back to the alley, screeching to a stop near where she'd thrown the box. Lyra jumped out and ran to the wall, 8 feet high, brick, topped with broken glass. The box was on the other side. She could see it lying in what looked like a vacant lot, papers scattered around it. "I'll boost you," Anthony said. "The glass? I don't care about the glass. We need that evidence or everything falls apart." He laced his fingers together, and Lyra stepped into his hands. He lifted her easily, and she grabbed the top of the wall, ignoring the glass cutting into her palms, and hauled herself over. She hit the ground on the other side, hard enough to knock the air from her lungs, but forced herself up and started grabbing papers. Most of them were still there. Some had blown away, scattered by wind, but the photographs were intact. The financial records were intact. The note about Graves was gone. She searched frantically, crawling through garbage and mud, but it wasn't there. The single piece of evidence that proved the FBI detective was dirty had disappeared. "Lyra, come on!" Anthony's voice from the other side of the wall. She gave up searching, shoved what she had back into the box, and scrambled back over the wall. Anthony caught her as she dropped, steadied her, and they ran back to the car. 2 minutes later, they were blocks away, weaving through side streets, putting distance between them and Vincent's dead men. "Where are we going?" Lyra asked. "Somewhere safe." "That's what you said about the warehouse." "Yeah, well, things change." He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You okay?" Her hands were bleeding from the glass. Her scalp throbbed where the man had grabbed her hair. Her entire body was shaking from adrenaline and terror, but she was alive. "Define okay." "Fair enough." They drove for 20 minutes, silence except for the engine and Lyra's ragged breathing. She tried to process what had just happened. Vincent's men had found her, had cornered her, had been seconds away from taking her when Anthony appeared, which meant Cassian had kept his word about having people watching, had kept her safe even after everything, or maybe he'd just been protecting his evidence. The thought was bitter, ugly, but she couldn't shake it. They pulled up in front of a building that looked like an old factory. Brick, boarded windows, the kind of place the city had forgotten. Anthony led her inside through a maze of rusted equipment and empty rooms to a freight elevator that somehow still worked. They rode up 3 floors in silence. The doors opened onto a space that had been converted into something livable. Not nice, not comfortable, but functional. Mattresses on the floor, a kitchenette, windows covered with heavy curtains. And sitting on one of the mattresses, looking worse than Lyra had ever seen him, was Cassian. "You're supposed to be in the hospital," she said. "I checked myself out, against medical advice." He tried to stand, winced, settled for leaning back against the wall. He was pale, his shirt dark with blood seeping through bandages, but his eyes were sharp, focused on her. "You're hurt. Your father's people tried to grab me." "I know." Anthony called. His gaze shifted to Anthony. "Clean this up. I need to talk to her alone." Anthony hesitated. "Boss, you shouldn't—" "Out!" It wasn't a request. Anthony left, and Lyra was alone with the man who'd turned her life into a war zone. "Let me see your hands," Cassian said. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding." "So are you." Lyra, No. She set the box down with enough force that papers scattered. "No more orders, no more protection, no more acting like you give a damn about me when we both know this was all strategy." "That's not true." "Which part? The part where you manipulated me into falling for you? The part where you positioned me as a witness without my knowledge? Or the part where you collected evidence for 3 years while using me as cover?" Cassian closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they held something raw and painful. All of it was strategy. At first, but feelings aren't strategy, and what I feel for you, his voice cracked. That's real. That's the one thing in this entire mess that's actually real. How would I know? How would I ever know what's real with you? Because I'm telling you, because I've got nothing left to hide and no reason to lie. My father's trying to kill us both. The FBI's case depends on testimony from a dirty cop, and I'm sitting here bleeding out in an abandoned factory because the hospital wasn't safe. So believe me or don't, but I love you. And that's the truth. The words should have meant something, should have mattered, but Lyra was too tired, too scared, too angry to let them land. Your father called me, she said, offered me a deal. Bring him the evidence, walk away free. Cassian's expression went cold. Dangerous. And I said no. Then I threw the evidence over a wall to keep his people from taking it. That was stupid, reckless. Yeah, I know. But it was mine. My choice, not yours, not your father's. Mine. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Or just exhaustion. Most of it's still there? Everything except one document. The note about Graves being on your father's payroll. It's gone. Cassian swore, low and vicious. That was proof. Without it, Graves can claim ignorance, can say he didn't know he was being paid by my father. Then we find another way to prove it. There is no other way. That was the only paper trail. Then we make him confess. How? Lyra thought about it. About Graves showing up at the office, at the FBI field office, at every turn of this nightmare. About the way he'd pressured her, threatened her, painted Cassian as a monster while hiding his own sins. He wants me to testify, she said slowly. Wants me to be his star witness. What if I offer him something better? Like what? You. Tell him I'll wear a wire. Get you to confess to crimes your father committed. Give Graves enough to close his case without the trial. That would never work. Why not? Because Graves knows I won't confess to things I didn't do. And recording me talking about my father's crimes doesn't help their case. They need testimony. Witnesses on the stand, not recordings. Then what's our play? Cassian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, harder. The voice of someone who'd made a decision that couldn't be unmade. We go to war. We hit my father before he hits us. Take out his operations, his people, his power base. Force him into the open where the FBI can't ignore what he is. That's insane. That's survival. He met her eyes. 3 years I spent building a case. 3 years of gathering evidence, documenting crimes, playing the good son while planning his destruction. And now he knows. Now he's hunting me, hunting you. And if we don't strike first, we don't get a second chance. I'm not a soldier, Cassian. I'm not built for this. Neither was I, until I had to be. The weight of it settled over her. This wasn't about love anymore. Wasn't about trust or betrayal or broken promises. It was about survival. About two people trapped in a war neither of them had wanted, but both of them had to fight. What do you need me to do? She asked quietly. Stay alive. Stay here where my people can protect you. Let me handle the rest. No. Lyra, I said no. You don't get to bench me while you play hero. I'm in this. All the way. So either use me or I'll find my own way to end it. Cassian stared at her like he was seeing someone new. Someone harder. Someone who'd been forged in the fire of the last 72 hours and come out different on the other side. Okay, he said finally. Okay, here's what we do. Ours. The plan was insane. Suicidal, probably, but it was all they had. Vincent Moretti ran his operations out of a shipping warehouse on the South Docks. Not the legitimate side of the business, the real one. The one where illegal goods moved through Chicago on their way to buyers across the country. The one that was supposed to be untouchable because half the dock workers were on his payroll and the other half knew better than to ask questions. Cassian had documentation on everything. Shipping manifests, payment records, photographs of deliveries that never appeared on official logs. If the FBI raided that warehouse during an active operation, they'd find enough evidence to bury Vincent without needing testimony from Cassian or anyone else. The problem was getting the FBI there at the right time, which meant someone had to make the call, someone who wasn't Cassian, Someone Vincent would believe was acting independently. Someone like Lyra. You call Graves, Cassian explained, his voice tight with pain and exhaustion. Tell him you want to cooperate. Tell him you have information about Vincent's operations, but you're scared to come in. Make him meet you somewhere public, somewhere you can control the conversation. And then? Then you tell him about the warehouse. Give him the address, the time of the next shipment, tomorrow night at midnight. Make it sound like you overheard something, like you're giving him the bust of his career. He won't believe me. He'll believe you're scared. He'll believe you want immunity. And he'll believe that catching Vincent Moretti in the middle of a smuggling operation is worth the risk. Cassian shifted, pain flashing across his face. But you can't go alone. I'll have people there watching. If Graves tries anything, if he contacts Vincent instead of raiding the warehouse, we'll know. And if the raid happens, if the FBI actually shows up and arrests Vincent, then it's over. My father goes to prison. The case against me evaporates because I'm the one who provided the evidence, and you. He reached out, his hand finding hers. You get to walk away clean. New name if you want it. New city, new life. Everything I promised you, minus the lies. Lyra looked at their joined hands. His were cold, shaking slightly from blood loss or medication or just the weight of everything collapsing around them. Hers were bandaged from the glass, stained with blood that might have been hers or his or the men Anthony had killed. What about us? She asked. There is no us. Not after this. You deserve better than a man who destroyed your life to save his own. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that despite everything, despite the lies and the manipulation and the calculated strategy, she'd seen something real in him, something worth fighting for. But maybe that was just more manipulation. Maybe she'd never know what was real and what was theater. Maybe it didn't matter. Okay, she said, I'll make the call. She called Graves from a burner phone at dawn, rehearsed what she'd say, kept her voice shaky, scared, the kind of scared that came from being hunted and having nowhere left to run. Detective Graves? It's Livia Vale. I need to talk to you. Miss Vale? He sounded surprised, pleased. I was hoping you'd come to your senses. Where are you? I can't tell you that, but I have information about Vincent Moretti, about his operations. What kind of operations? The kind that happened at a warehouse on the South Docks. Tomorrow night at midnight, there's a shipment coming in. Something big. If you raid it, you'll have everything you need to convict him. A pause. She could practically hear him thinking, calculating whether this was a trap. How do you know this? I overheard a phone call when they were looking for me. I heard Vincent talking to someone about the shipment, about how it had to go perfectly because you were getting too close. Where did you hear this call? It doesn't matter. What matters is you can catch him, red-handed. Isn't that what you wanted? Isn't that what this whole investigation is about? It's one of the things it's about. The other thing is taking down Cassian Moretti, who you've been protecting. I'm not protecting anyone. I'm trying to stay alive. And if helping you catch Vincent keeps me alive, then that's what I'll do. Another pause, longer this time. You'll need to come in, give an official statement, go on record with what you know. After the raid, after Vincent is in custody, then I'll come in. Then I'll tell you everything, but not before. It's not safe. Miss Vale, midnight tomorrow, South Docks. Warehouse 47. Be there or don't. But if you're not there, blood's on your hands. She hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking. Cassian was watching from across the room, his expression unreadable. You did good, he said. He didn't believe me. He'll check it out, can't afford not to. If there's even a chance I'm right about the shipment, he has to move on it. And if he tells Vincent instead, if he warns him, then we find out whose side Graves is really on, and we adapt. Lyra set down the phone and walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that felt obscene given everything happening in the shadows below. Somewhere out there, Vincent Moretti was planning his next move. Somewhere, Detective Graves was deciding whether to be a cop or a criminal. And somewhere, people were living normal lives, unaware that the city they called home was built on violence and blood. I'm scared, she said quietly. Cassian's reflection appeared in the window behind her. He moved slowly, carefully, like every step cost him. When he reached her, he didn't touch her, just stood close enough that she could feel his warmth. So am I. You don't seem scared. I've had practice hiding it. Teach me. He was quiet for a moment, then, you don't hide it, you use it. Fear makes you sharp, makes you fast, makes you do things you didn't think you were capable of. So don't fight it, let it fuel you. Is that what you did? When you decided to betray your father? I didn't betray him, I chose survival over loyalty. There's a difference. Is there? I don't know anymore. He exhaled slowly. All I know is that tomorrow night, this ends. One way or another. And when it's over, you're free. That's the only thing that matters. What about you? I'll figure it out. That's not a plan. It's all I've got. Lyra turned to face him. He looked terrible, pale, exhausted, held together by bandages and willpower. But his eyes were clear, determined, the eyes of someone who'd made peace with whatever came next. If we survive this, she said, if we actually make it out alive, I want the truth, all of it. Every lie you told, every manipulation, everything you felt and everything you faked. I want to know what was real. Okay? Promise me. I promise. She didn't know if she believed him, didn't know if she'd ever believe him again. But it was something. A thread to hold on to while everything else unraveled. The next 30 hours passed in a haze of waiting and planning. Anthony came and went, bringing food and updates. Graves had taken the bait. He'd requested a tactical team for a warehouse raid. The operation was greenlit for midnight, which meant either Graves was doing his job or he was walking into a trap Vincent had set using Lyra's information. They'd know soon enough. Cassian spent most of the time on his phone, coordinating with people Lyra didn't know, making arrangements for contingencies she didn't want to think about. He was barely holding it together. She could see it in the way he moved, the way his hand shook when he thought no one was looking. The gunshot wounds were infected. He needed a hospital, needed antibiotics and surgery and actual medical care. But walking into a hospital meant getting arrested or killed. So he swallowed pills that probably weren't strong enough and kept moving because stopping meant dying. At 11 o'clock the night of the raid, they left the factory. Anthony drove them south, toward the docks, toward whatever waited in the darkness. Lyra sat in the back seat with Cassian, their shoulders touching, neither of them speaking. What was there to say? They'd made their play, set everything in motion. Now they just had to survive the consequences. The warehouse district was exactly what she'd expected. Abandoned buildings, rusted equipment, the smell of lake water and industrial decay. Anthony parked 3 blocks away from Warehouse 47 in the shadow of a building that looked ready to collapse. You sure about this? He asked Cassian. No, do it anyway. They got out of the car. The night was cold enough that Lyra's breath came out in white clouds. Cold enough that her fingers went numb within seconds. Cold enough that she couldn't tell if she was shaking from temperature or terror. Cassian handed her a phone. If something goes wrong, you call Anthony. He'll get you out. What about you? Don't worry about me. Cassian, promise me. If this goes bad, you run. You don't look back. You don't try to save me. You just run. I can't. Promise me. The desperation in his voice broke something in her chest. She nodded, even though they both knew it was a lie, even though she had no intention of running if he was in danger. They moved through the shadows toward the warehouse. Cassian knew the layout, had probably been here dozens of times when this was still his father's operation. He led them to a service entrance on the east side, hidden behind a dumpster, and used a key he shouldn't have had to let them in. The interior was dark, massive. The ceiling lost in shadows 30 feet up. Shipping containers stacked like building blocks. Forklifts parked in neat rows. And in the center, near the loading dock, a group of men working by flashlight to unload a truck. Vincent's people. Moving product. Exactly like Cassian had said they would be. Where's the FBI? Lyra whispered. They'll wait until the transaction is complete. Maximum charges that way. They're probably already in position. And your father? Cassian pointed. In the office overlooking the warehouse floor, visible through grimy windows, was Vincent Moretti, watching his operation, supervising his empire, exactly where they needed him to be. Now we wait, Cassian said, But they didn't have to wait long. At 12:17, the lights blazed on. Floodlights, spotlights, everything illuminating the warehouse floor like a stage. And through the main entrance came a flood of federal agents in tactical gear, weapons raised, voices shouting commands that echoed off the concrete walls. "Federal agents, get on the ground!" Chaos erupted. Vincent's people scattered. Some ran. Some reached for weapons. The agents moved with precision, cutting off exits, herding people toward the center, shouting orders that blended into a wall of noise. And in the office, Vincent stood watching it all fall apart. His face was visible through the windows, shock giving way to rage, giving way to something colder. Calculation. He pulled out his phone. "He's calling for backup," Cassian said. "This is about to get worse." "How much worse?" "My father doesn't go down quiet. He has people outside, armed. They'll come in shooting." "Then we need to go. Now." But before they could move, Vincent's eyes found them, found Cassian standing in the shadows, watching his father's empire crumble. And the look on Vincent's face was pure murder. He said something into the phone, pointed directly at where they were hiding. "Run," Cassian said. They ran, back through the service entrance, into the alley, toward Anthony's car 3 blocks away. Behind them, Lara heard gunfire, not the controlled shots of federal agents. Wild shooting, desperate shooting, the sound of a war starting. They made it 2 blocks before the car appeared, not Anthony's car, a different one. Bigger, faster. It screeched around the corner and blocked their path, and 4 men poured out with guns drawn. Vincent's backup, his cleanup crew, the people who made problems disappear. Cassian stepped in front of Lyra, his body a shield, his hand reaching for a gun she hadn't known he was carrying. "Run," he said again. "Anthony's 1 block north. Find him. Go." "I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are. Because if we both die here, everything we did was for nothing. So run, Lyra, run, and don't look back." The men were moving closer, guns raised, faces hidden behind masks. They weren't here to talk, weren't here to negotiate. They were here to execute. Lyra made a choice. She grabbed Cassian's gun, yanked it from his hand, and fired 3 shots into the air. The men dove for cover. The sound echoed through the alley, loud enough to draw attention, loud enough that anyone nearby would hear, including the federal agents 1 block over. "What the hell are you doing?" Cassian shouted. "Saving us both." More gunfire, close now, the men recovering from their surprise, returning fire. Bullets sparked off brick, off concrete. Off the dumpster, Lyra and Cassian dove behind. This was it. This was how it ended. Trapped in an alley with 4 armed men and no way out. Except the alley lit up with red and blue lights, sirens screaming, federal vehicles pouring in from both ends, trapping Vincent's men in the middle. And at the front of the convoy, looking furious and triumphant at the same time, was Detective Nathan Graves. "Weapons down! Now!" The men hesitated, looked at each other, looked at the agents surrounding them. They were professionals enough to know when the game was over. They dropped their weapons. Graves walked toward Lyra and Cassian, his gun still drawn, his expression unreadable. When he reached them, he looked at Cassian like he was seeing him for the first time. "You set this up. The phone call from Miss Vale, the tip about the warehouse, all of it." "Yes," Cassian said. "Why?" "Because my father was going to kill us both, and this was the only way to stop him." Graves was quiet for a long moment. Then he holstered his weapon. "Vincent Moretti is in custody, so are 15 of his associates. We have enough evidence to put him away for life. Which means," he looked at Cassian, "you're done. The immunity deal stands. You testify, you walk. And her?" Cassian nodded toward Lyra. "She walks too. No charges. No testimony required unless she volunteers it. She's free." Lyra's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the dirty alley pavement, her hands still shaking, the gun still clutched in her grip. It was over. It was actually over. Except it wasn't. Because Vincent Moretti didn't go quietly, didn't accept defeat. And as the agents were loading him into an armored vehicle, as Graves was reading him his rights, Vincent looked directly at his son and smiled. It was the kind of smile that promised retribution, that promised this wasn't over, that promised that even from prison, even with his empire destroyed, he would find a way to make Cassian pay for his betrayal. "He's going to come after you," Lyra said quietly. from prison, through his contacts, however he can. I know. So what do we do? Cassian looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain, vulnerable, human. We survive, he said. Whatever it takes. We survive. But as the federal vehicles drove away, as the warehouse burned behind them, someone had set it on fire during the chaos. Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that surviving wasn't going to be enough, because Vincent Moretti was down, but he wasn't out, and the war was far from over. The federal courthouse smelled like old wood and institutional coffee, the kind that had been sitting in a pot since dawn and tasted like regret. Lyra sat on a bench outside the courtroom, watching lawyers in expensive suits hurry past with briefcases that probably cost more than she used to make in a month. 3 weeks had passed since the raid. 3 weeks of depositions and interviews and sleeping in safe houses that all looked the same. 3 weeks of waiting for this moment. Vincent Moretti's trial. The prosecution had called her as a witness, even though Graves had promised she wouldn't have to testify. Apparently, promises meant different things to different people. They wanted her to establish the timeline, to explain how she'd come to work at Moretti Holdings, how she'd accessed the files, what she'd seen in the weeks before everything collapsed. Simple testimony, easy testimony. The kind that shouldn't matter except it put her in that courtroom in front of Vincent, in front of cameras and reporters who would turn her into a footnote in someone else's story. She hadn't seen Cassian since the night of the raid. He'd been taken into protective custody immediately, too valuable as a witness to risk, too connected to Vincent's operations to trust. Graves had told her Cassian was safe, recovering, preparing his own testimony that would form the backbone of the prosecution's case, but she didn't know if that was true. Didn't know if he was actually safe or if that was just another lie wrapped in official-sounding language. The courtroom doors opened. A bailiff appeared, scanning the hallway. Lyra Vale? Her stomach dropped. That's me. You're up next. Please come with me. She stood on legs that felt like water and followed him through those doors into a room that was smaller than she'd expected, but somehow still overwhelming. Wood paneling, high ceilings, rows of spectators who turned to stare as she walked down the aisle toward the witness stand. And at the defense table, sitting between two lawyers who probably cost $1,000 an hour, was Vincent Moretti. He looked older than she remembered, grayer, but his eyes were the same, cold and calculating. The eyes of a man who'd built an empire on violence and wouldn't accept its destruction quietly. He watched her approach with an expression that promised retribution. Lyra took the stand, swore to tell the truth, tried not to think about how many truths she'd been told in the last few months and how few of them had actually been honest. The prosecutor was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper suit. She approached the stand with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times and won 98 of them. Miss Vale, can you tell the court how you came to be employed at Moretti Holdings? Lyra's throat was dry. She reached for the water glass on the stand, took a sip that didn't help. I was offered a position as a financial analyst after an interview with Margaret Chen, the head of finance. And who arranged this interview? Cassian Moretti, the defendant's son. Yes. How did you meet Cassian Moretti? The memory hit like a fist. That alley, those men, the way Cassian had stepped out of the darkness and made her feel safe, even though he was probably the most dangerous person there. She'd thought it was chance, fate. She'd been so stupid. He intervened when I was being attacked, outside the club where I worked. He gave me his card and told me to call if I needed anything. And did you call? He texted me first the next morning, asked how I was, offered to take me to dinner. So he pursued you romantically? Yes. The prosecutor pulled out a photograph, passed it to Lyra. It was her and Cassian at that restaurant, the one where he'd confessed to following her, to watching her for months. Someone had been taking surveillance photos. Someone had documented everything. Is this you and Cassian Moretti at Le Bernardin on the night of February 14th? Yes. And at this dinner, did Mr. Moretti discuss his family's business? He said his family had built an empire, that empires weren't built on honest work, that there were parts of the city that existed because men like him allowed them to exist. Did you understand what he meant by that? I understood he was telling me his family was involved in criminal activity, and yet you continued seeing him. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Lyra felt heat rise in her face. Yes. Why? Because he made her feel seen. Because he made her feel protected. Because she'd been drowning in debt and loneliness, and he'd offered her a life raft even though it turned out to be made of lies. I don't know, she said quietly. The prosecutor smiled, not warm, not kind, the smile of someone who'd just gotten the answer they wanted. No further questions. Vincent's lawyer stood. He was older than the prosecutor, silver-haired and expensive, the kind of lawyer who made careers out of defending people everyone knew were guilty. Miss Vale, you testified that my client's son pursued you romantically. Did you ever consider that you were being manipulated? Objection calls for speculation. I'll rephrase. Miss Vale, did Cassian Moretti ever ask you to access files at Moretti Holdings that were outside your job description? Lyra thought about the documents she'd reviewed, the portfolios she'd analyzed. She'd thought it was all legitimate work, but now, knowing what she knew about Cassian's plan, about the evidence he was collecting, had he been using her to document his father's crimes? No, he never asked me to access anything specific. But you did access files, client portfolios, investment records, transaction histories. That was my job. Your job that my client's son arranged for you. Yes, so you were positioned within the company by Cassian Moretti, given access to sensitive financial information by Cassian Moretti, and now you're testifying against my client using knowledge you gained through that position. Doesn't that strike you as convenient? Objection. Argumentative. Sustained. But the damage was done. The defense attorney had planted the seed that she wasn't a victim, she was a co-conspirator, that she'd been working with Cassian from the start to build a case against Vincent, that her testimony was tainted by bias and manipulation. The rest of the questioning was brutal. They tore apart her timeline, questioned her motivations, implied she'd been sleeping with Cassian to gain access to the company. By the time they dismissed her, Lyra felt like she'd been flayed alive. She walked out of that courtroom with her head down, ignoring the reporters shouting questions, ignoring the cameras flashing, ignoring everything except the need to get out of that building and breathe air that didn't taste like judgment. She made it to the steps outside before someone grabbed her arm. Not roughly, but firmly enough that she couldn't pull away without making a scene. She turned, ready to tell whoever it was to go to hell, and found herself staring at Cassian. He looked worse than she'd ever seen him, thinner, paler. The kind of hollowed out that came from weeks of stress and not enough sleep and injuries that hadn't fully healed. But he was there, standing in front of her, real. You shouldn't be here, she said. I know, I had to see you. They'll see us together. The defense will use it to prove we've been coordinating testimony. I don't care. You should care. Your entire immunity deal depends on Lyra. He said her name like it hurt. I don't care about the deal. I don't care about any of it. I just needed to see that you were okay. I'm not okay. I just got torn apart on the witness stand because your father's lawyers think I'm your accomplice. I'm sorry. That doesn't fix anything. I know. He looked like he wanted to reach for her, wanted to pull her close the way he had in her apartment, in his car, in all those moments that felt like a lifetime ago. But he kept his hands at his sides. I never meant for it to go this far. Never meant for you to end up in that courtroom. But I did, because you made choices that put me there. Yes, at least he didn't deny it. Didn't try to spin it into something noble or necessary. Just admitted the truth and let it sit between them, ugly and undeniable. Why? Lyra asked. Why me? Out of everyone in this city, why did you choose me? Cassian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. Because you looked like her. Sophia, the first time I saw you at that club, you reminded me of her. Same build, same hair, same way of moving through the world, like you were trying not to take up too much space. And I thought, he stopped, started again. I thought if I could save you, if I could give you the life I couldn't give her, maybe it would balance the scales. Maybe it would make up for letting her go. The confession hit like ice water. So I was a replacement. A way for you to feel less guilty about the woman you lost. At first, but then I got to know you, and you weren't her, you were you, stubborn and brave and willing to fight for a life you deserved even when the world kept pushing you down. And I fell in love with who you actually were, not who I wanted you to be. How am I supposed to believe that? How am I supposed to trust anything you say? You're not. I've given you every reason not to trust me, but I'm telling you anyway because you deserve the truth. All of it. Even the parts that make me look like a monster. Lyra's eyes burned. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of cameras and reporters and people who would turn her tears into headlines. But it took everything she had to hold them back. I loved you, she said quietly. Or I thought I did, but I don't know what was real and what was performance. I don't know if you ever actually cared about me or if I was just useful. It was real. Every moment that mattered was real. The rest, the job, the setup, the positioning, that was strategy. But what I felt for you, that was the one thing I couldn't fake. I don't know if I believe you. I know. A reporter was pushing through the crowd toward them, camera raised. Cassian saw it too. He stepped back, putting distance between them that felt like miles. I have to go. I testify tomorrow. After that, he stopped. After that, I don't know. They'll probably relocate me. New name, new city, witness protection until they're sure Vincent's people aren't coming after me. So this is goodbye. This is goodbye. She should have walked away, should have turned and left without another word. But she couldn't make her feet move, couldn't make herself accept that this was how it ended, on courthouse steps, surrounded by strangers, with a man who'd destroyed her life and saved it in equal measure. Did you mean it? She asked. When you said you loved me. Did you mean it? Yes. Say it. I want to hear you say it. Cassian looked at her with eyes that held 3 years of secrets and 6 weeks of something that might have been real. I love you. I've loved you since that night in the alley when you tried to walk away on a twisted ankle because you were too proud to accept help. I loved you when you showed up for that interview, even though you knew something was wrong. I loved you when you refused my father's money because you wouldn't be bought. And I love you now, standing here knowing you'll never forgive me and I don't deserve you anyway. Boss says. The reporter was close now, shouting questions. Other cameras were turning their way. Goodbye, Cassian, Lyra said. Goodbye, Lyra. She walked away. This time her feet obeyed. She didn't look back, didn't watch him disappear into whatever protection the federal government had arranged. Just kept walking until the courthouse was behind her and she was alone on a Chicago street with no idea what came next. The trial lasted 3 more weeks. Cassian testified for 2 days straight, walking the jury through 3 years of evidence, naming names, describing operations in detail that made the news crews salivate. Lyra watched some of it on television from a hotel room the FBI had put her in for protection. Watched Cassian sit in that witness stand and systematically destroy his father's empire with the same cold precision he'd used to build it. Vincent was convicted on all counts: racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder. They sentenced him to life without parole, and when the judge read the verdict, Vincent's expression didn't change. He just looked at his son with that same cold smile, that same promise of retribution, and let them lead him away. The FBI kept Lyra in protective custody for another month after the trial ended, long enough to make sure Vincent's remaining associates weren't coming after witnesses, long enough to process the paperwork for her immunity agreement, long enough that she started to feel like a ghost haunting her own life. They offered her witness protection, new identity, new city, a stipend to help her start over somewhere far from Chicago and everything that had happened. She said no. She'd spent her entire life running from one disaster to the next, trying to build something stable and failing every time. She was done running, done letting other people decide who she was and where she belonged. Chicago was her city. She'd claimed it, earned it through blood and fear and survival. And she wasn't giving it up because some dead mobster's loyalists might hold a grudge. The FBI wasn't happy with her decision, Graves especially. He showed up at her hotel room 3 days before they were scheduled to release her back into the world. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Wouldn't be my first." Vincent Moretti had reached beyond what we've dismantled. People who owed him favors, people who'll want revenge. Then they'll have to find me, and I'm good at surviving. Graves studied her for a long moment. What happened to the woman who worked at that nightclub? The one who was just trying to make rent? She learned that survival isn't enough, that you have to choose who you want to be, even when all the choices are bad. And who did you choose to be? Someone who doesn't run anymore. He left her his card. Told her to call if she needed anything. She threw it in the trash the moment the door closed. The FBI released her on a Tuesday morning in late April. The weather had finally broken, spring creeping into the city with tentative warmth and the smell of things growing. Lyra walked out of that hotel with everything she owned in a backpack and enough money in her account to survive for a few months if she was careful. She didn't go back to her old apartment. The landlord had rented it out after she disappeared, probably assuming she was dead or in jail. She stayed in a youth hostel for a week while she looked for work, applied for jobs using references that couldn't mention Moretti Holdings without triggering red flags. It was harder than she'd expected. Turns out being a witness in a high-profile organized crime trial made employers nervous. They'd see her name, connect it to the news coverage, and suddenly the position was filled, or they'd decided to promote from within, or there was a hiring freeze they'd just implemented. She burned through her savings faster than she'd hoped. Ended up taking a job at a coffee shop in Wicker Park that paid minimum wage, and didn't ask questions. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the future she'd imagined, but it was hers. 3 months passed. Summer hit Chicago like a hammer, turning the city into a sweatbox that made her miss the brutal cold of February. Lyra worked her shifts at the coffee shop, came home to the studio apartment she'd finally scraped together enough to rent, and tried not to think about everything she'd lost. She didn't watch the news, didn't read articles about Vincent Moretti or Cassian or the remains of the empire they'd destroyed. Just lived day to day, hour to hour, trying to figure out who Lyra Vale was when she wasn't running or fighting or surviving someone else's war. One evening in late July, she was closing the coffee shop when someone knocked on the glass door. She looked up, ready to point at the sign that said they were closed, and froze. Margaret Chen stood outside, looking uncomfortable in casual clothes like she'd never figured out how to dress for anything except business meetings. Lyra unlocked the door. Margaret. Hi, Lyra. Can I come in? We're closed. I know. I just need 5 minutes, please. Lyra stepped aside. Let her in, locked the door behind her because old habits died hard, and she'd learned to be paranoid about who had access to her location. How did you find me? Lyra asked. I've been looking for weeks. You disappeared after the trial, and Margaret stopped. I wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm fine. You're working in a coffee shop. It's honest work. You're better than this. Better than making lattes for entitled hipsters. Maybe, but it's what I've got right now. Margaret pulled an envelope from her purse, set it on the counter between them. I started my own firm, financial consulting. I took some clients from Moretti Holdings before it collapsed completely, built something clean, something legitimate, and I need analysts, good analysts, people I can trust. Lyra stared at the envelope. Why? Because you were good. Better than most of the people I've worked with, and because you got screwed over by circumstances you didn't create. You deserve a chance to build something real. Lyra's throat tightened. I don't know if I can go back to that world. It's not that world. It's a new one. One we build together. No mob connections, no federal investigations, just honest work for clients who need expertise. Margaret pushed the envelope closer. Job offer, salary, benefits, everything in writing. Read it, think about it. Call me when you decide. She left before Lyra could respond. Left her standing in an empty coffee shop with an envelope that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Lyra didn't open it that night, or the next day, just carried it around like a talisman, feeling the weight of possibility and fear in equal measure. She'd been burned by job offers before, by promises that turned out to be strategies, by people who said they wanted to help but really just wanted to use her. But Margaret had been real. Had been one of the few people at Moretti Holdings who'd treated her like she belonged, who'd given her actual work instead of busy work, who'd seen potential instead of just a pretty face the boss was sleeping with. 3 days later, Lyra opened the envelope. The offer was generous. More than generous. $60,000 a year starting salary, room for growth, benefits that included health insurance and retirement planning. The kind of job that could build a life, not just survive one. She called the number Margaret had written on the offer letter. Chen Consulting. Margaret, it's Lyra Vale. Lyra. She could hear the smile in Margaret's voice. Tell me you're calling with good news. When do I start? The work was hard. Not physically. She'd left those brutal shifts at Velvet Saint behind, but mentally. Margaret's clients were demanding, needed detailed analysis, creative solutions, the kind of financial expertise that required Lara to push herself harder than she'd been pushed in months. But it was good hard, the kind that made her fall into bed exhausted but satisfied instead of just empty. She was good at it too, better than she'd expected. Turned out the skills she'd developed at Moretti Holdings, the ability to spot patterns, to dig into data and find what others missed. Those skills were valuable even in legitimate business. 6 months passed, then a year. Lyra built a life that belonged to her, an apartment she'd furnished with her own money, friends she'd made through work and yoga classes and random encounters at bars, a routine that didn't involve looking over her shoulder every 5 minutes. She didn't date, couldn't bring herself to trust someone new, to let them close enough to matter. Margaret set her up twice with guys from her social circle, nice guys, stable guys, the kind who had retirement plans and talked about the future like it was something guaranteed. Both times, Lyra made it through dinner and spent the next week making excuses about why she couldn't see them again. She told herself it was because she was busy, because she was focused on building her career, because she didn't need a relationship to be complete. But late at night, when the apartment was dark and quiet and she couldn't sleep, she knew the truth. She was still in love with Cassian Moretti, still carrying the weight of what they'd been, what they'd almost been, what they could never be. It was stupid, destructive. He'd lied to her, used her, turned her life into a war zone, but he'd also saved her, protected her, loved her in the broken way of someone who'd never learned how to love without strategy and calculation. She wondered sometimes where he was. If witness protection had given him a new name, a new face, a new life in some small town where no one knew who he'd been. If he thought about her. If he regretted the choices that had led them both into hell. But she never tried to find out. Never contacted anyone who might know. Just lived with the ghost of him haunting the edges of her life. A reminder of everything she'd survived and everything she'd lost. 2 years after the trial, on a cold February morning that reminded her of the night they'd met, Lyra got a call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, almost sent it to voicemail, and went about her day. But something made her pick up. Hello? Miss Vale, this is U.S. Marshal Patricia Donovan. I'm calling about Cassian Moretti. Lyra's heart stopped. Is he alive? He is. But there's been a situation. Someone found him. We had to relocate him again, and during the extraction, she paused. He asked me to call you, to tell you something. What? He said to tell you that 3 years ago, he made a choice that destroyed both your lives. And if he could go back, he'd make the same choice. Because even with everything that happened, even with all the pain, he'd rather have those few weeks with you than a lifetime without them. Lyra's vision blurred. Why are you telling me this? Because he thinks he's going to die. The extraction went bad. He was shot. We got him to a hospital, but the marshal's voice softened. He wanted you to know, in case he doesn't make it. Where is he? Which hospital? I can't tell you that. It's protected information. Then why call? Why tell me he's dying if there's nothing I can do? Because he asked me to. And because I've been doing this job for 15 years and I've never seen anyone look the way he looked when he said your name. So I'm breaking protocol. I'm telling you he's at Northwestern Memorial, 4th floor, ICU, under the name David Park. You have maybe an hour before my supervisors realize I told you and lock down the floor. What you do with that information is up to you. The line went dead. Lyra stood in her apartment holding her phone, her mind racing. She should stay away. Should let him die or recover without her. Should protect the life she'd built from the wreckage of what he'd destroyed. Should. She grabbed her coat and ran. The cab ride to Northwestern felt like it took hours, even though it was only 15 minutes. She burst through the hospital entrance, ignored the reception desk, went straight for the elevators. The ICU was on the 4th floor. She stepped out into a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and fear, past nurses who were too busy to stop her, to a room at the end where 2 federal marshals stood guard. I need to see David Park, she said. Family only. I'm his... She stopped. What was she? Ex-girlfriend? Victim? Co-conspirator in the destruction of Chicago's most powerful crime family? I'm someone he asked for. Marshal Donovan called me. The guards looked at each other. Something passed between them. An understanding, maybe, or just exhaustion with protocol that kept dying people from the ones they loved. 5 minutes, one of them said. Then you're out. Lyra pushed through the door into a room that was too white, too bright, too full of machines that beeped and whirred and kept track of a life hanging by threads. And in the bed, connected to more tubes than seemed possible, was Cassian. He looked like he was already dead. Pale skin, hollow cheeks, bandages wrapping his torso where the bullets had torn through. But his eyes were open, and when he saw her, something like relief crossed his face. "You came," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "You asked for me. I didn't think you would. I almost didn't." She moved closer to the bed, careful not to touch anything, not to disturb the delicate balance of machines keeping him alive. "They said someone found you. Vincent's people. Even from prison, he's still trying to kill me. Did they catch them? Does it matter?" He tried to smile, failed. "I'm not going to make it anyway." "Don't say that. It's true. I can feel it. Everything shutting down, everything giving up." He closed his eyes briefly. "I'm glad you came. I needed to see you one more time, needed to tell you, the marshal told me, that you'd make the same choices, that you'd rather have those weeks than nothing. It's true. All of it." His hand moved slightly on the bed, reaching for hers. "I destroyed your life. I know that. But you made mine worth living. Even for just those few weeks. You made me remember what it felt like to be human instead of just surviving." Lyra's eyes burned. She took his hand carefully, feeling how cold it was, how fragile. "I hate you for what you did to me. I know. I hate that I loved you, that I still love you, that even after everything, I can't let you go. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything." "I know." He squeezed her hand weakly. "But it's all I have left to give you." The machine started beeping faster, louder. A nurse burst through the door, followed by a doctor, and they were pushing Lyra aside, shouting medical terms she didn't understand, working with the frantic efficiency of people trying to pull someone back from the edge. "You need to leave," someone said, a hand on her arm, guiding her toward the door. "No, I can't." "Now, Miss Vale, we need space to work." She was in the hallway. The marshals were blocking the door, and inside that room, doctors were fighting to save a man who'd spent 3 years dismantling his father's empire and 2 years running from the consequences. Lyra slid down the wall and sat on the floor, her head in her hands, and waited. An hour passed. 2. Nurses came and went with expressions that gave nothing away. The marshals changed shifts. The hospital went through its rhythms of life and death and everything in between. Finally, the doctor emerged. He looked tired, old, like he'd seen too many of these endings and lost count of which ones mattered. "He's stable, for now. The next 48 hours will tell us if he's going to make it." "Can I see him?" He's sedated. Won't wake up for a while. But yes, briefly. She went back into that room. Back to the bed where Cassian lay unconscious, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision, kept alive by machines and sheer, stubborn will. "You don't get to die," she whispered. "Not yet. Not until I figure out if I actually forgive you, or if I just miss being important to someone. So you fight, you survive, and then we'll figure out what the hell comes next." She stayed until a nurse told her visiting hours were over. Stayed longer than she should have, holding the hand of a man who'd lied to her and saved her in equal measure, trying to reconcile the hatred and love that existed in the same space. When she finally left, the sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked like fire in Manbag. Cassian survived. Not easily, not quickly. But he clawed his way back from the edge with the same ruthless determination he'd used to build his case against Vincent. 3 days in the ICU, 2 weeks in recovery. Another month before they cleared him to leave the hospital under heavy protection. Lyra visited twice. Both times, they barely spoke. Just sat in that hospital room with the weight of everything between them, trying to find words that didn't exist. The second time he asked her a question. "Why did you come?" That first time, when the marshal called. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." She thought about lying, about protecting herself with distance and careful words, but she was tired of lies. "Because even after everything, some part of me still believed you when you said you loved me, and I couldn't let you die thinking I didn't love you back." "Do you?" Love me back? I don't know what I feel, except that it's complicated, and it hurts. And I don't know if I can ever trust you again, but I can't seem to let you go either. Cassian was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm going back into witness protection. They're moving me somewhere even more remote. Somewhere Vincent's people will never find me. I'll have a new name, new identity, and He stopped, started again. I want you to come with me. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and terrifying. What? I know it's insane. I know I don't deserve to ask, but I'm asking anyway. Come with me. We'll start over. Build something real this time. Something that isn't based on lies or strategy or fear. Cassian, I love you. I've loved you since that night in the alley, and I know I destroyed us. Know I gave you every reason to hate me. But if there's even a chance, if there's even a small part of you that thinks we could have something real, then come with me. Please. Lyra looked at him, broken and healing, hollowed out by violence and survival, asking her to give up everything she'd built to run away with him. It was the kind of offer that belonged in movies, not real life. The kind of romantic gesture that ignored reality and consequences, and the hard work of actually building trust. I can't, she said. Why not? Because I finally have a life that's mine, a job I earned, friends I chose, a future that isn't built on someone else's foundation, and her voice cracked. I can't give that up, not even for you, not even for the chance of something real. Cassian nodded slowly. She'd expected anger, argument, but he just looked sad, understanding, like he'd known what her answer would be before he asked. Okay. I don't have the right to ask you to sacrifice more. You've already paid enough for my choices. So this is it? You disappear into witness protection and I never see you again? Unless you change your mind. He met her eyes. The offer stands, forever. If you ever decide you want to try, if you ever think we could build something real, I'll be waiting, wherever they send me, whatever name they give me, I'll be waiting. That's not fair. I know, but it's true. She left that hospital room for the last time on a Thursday afternoon in April. Spring was blooming across Chicago again, the city coming back to life after another brutal winter. Lyra walked down those steps and stood on the sidewalk, watching traffic pass, watching people live their normal lives. She could go back, could tell Cassian yes, could give up her apartment and her job and the life she'd built to run away with a man who'd destroyed her once and might destroy her again. Or she could walk away, could choose herself, could build something stable and safe and entirely her own. She chose herself and kept walking. 3 years later, Lyra Vale stood in the conference room of Chen Consulting, looking out at the Chicago skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. She was a partner now. Margaret had promoted her 6 months ago after they'd landed a major client that Lyra had brought in through brilliant analysis and careful relationship building. She had an office, a team, a salary that let her save money and travel and buy art for her apartment. She had built something real. The door opened behind her. Margaret poked her head in. Your 2 o'clock is here. Thanks. Send them in. A man entered, mid-30s, dressed in a business-casual style that said he had money but didn't need to prove it. Brown hair instead of black, different build, different face. But when she looked at his eyes, she knew. Hello, Lyra. Her breath caught. Cassian. David Park. Financial consultant from Seattle, looking for expertise on expanding into Midwest markets. He smiled, and it was sad and hopeful and terrified all at once. I hear you're the best. How did you? I've been keeping track of you, from a distance, making sure you were safe, happy, successful. And you are. You built something incredible. You're not supposed to be here. Witness protection. Ended 6 months ago. Vincent died in prison. Heart attack. His organization collapsed completely without him. The FBI decided I wasn't at risk anymore. So they gave me my new identity and let me choose where to build my life. And you chose Chicago. I chose where you were. Lyra's heart was racing. You can't just show up after 3 years and expect... I don't expect anything. I'm not here to disrupt your life or ask you to change it. I'm here because I promised I'd wait. And now I don't have to wait in hiding anymore. So I'm here, in the same city, building my own life that happens to exist in the same space as yours. And if you want nothing to do with me, I'll respect that. I'll stay away. But if there's any chance, any small possibility that you might want to try again, I don't know if I can trust you. I know. I don't know if we could ever have something real. I know that too. So why are you here? He stepped closer, not too close, respectful of her space. Because I spent 3 years in witness protection thinking about what I'd say if I ever saw you again. And I realized I'd been wrong about everything. I thought I was protecting you by using you, by positioning you, by making strategic choices that kept you safe. But protection isn't strategy. Love isn't strategy. And if I ever get another chance with you, I want it to be built on truth, on honesty, on choosing each other every day instead of being forced together by circumstance. That's a nice speech. It's true. Lyra looked at him. This man who'd saved her and destroyed her, who'd lied to her and loved her, who'd disappeared for 3 years and come back asking for something she didn't know if she could give. I need time, she said, to think, to figure out if this is real or if it's just old feelings that never healed properly. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. And if I decide I can't do this, if I decide the risk is too great, then I'll accept it. I'll stay in Chicago because I've built something here, but I won't contact you, won't show up at your office or your apartment or anywhere else. You'll have the space you need to live your life. You promise? I promise. She walked him to the door, watched him leave with the same careful control he'd always had, the same ability to hide everything he was feeling behind a mask of calm. But just before he stepped into the elevator, he turned back. Lyra? Yeah? I meant it. What I said 3 years ago. I'd make the same choices, every single one. Because even with all the pain, even with everything we lost, those weeks with you were the only time I've ever felt human. And if I never get another moment with you, at least I have those. At least I have the memory of what it felt like to love someone and be loved back. The elevator doors closed. He was gone. And Lyra was left standing in her office, looking at the space where he'd been, trying to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do next. She took the time she'd asked for. Weeks turned into months. She saw him occasionally at networking events, at conferences, once at a coffee shop where they nodded at each other across the room like acquaintances instead of two people who'd been through hell together. He kept his promise. Never showed up uninvited, never pushed, just existed in her city, building his life parallel to hers, waiting for her to decide. Lyra went to therapy, spent sessions talking about trust and trauma, and what it meant to love someone who'd used you even if they'd loved you at the same time. The therapist didn't tell her what to do, just asked questions that made her think. What do you want? The therapist asked one session. I want to stop being afraid. Of him? Of being hurt again, of making the wrong choice, of giving up the stability I've built for the risk of something that might destroy me. Those are valid fears. But fear isn't the only thing that should guide your choices. What do you want? Not what's safe, not what's smart. What do you actually want? Lyra thought about it, thought about the life she'd built, successful and stable, and entirely her own. Thought about the night she lay awake missing someone who'd been gone for 3 years. Thought about the moment in the hospital when she'd held Cassian's hand and realized that love wasn't simple, wasn't clean, wasn't the fairy tale version she'd imagined. I want to try, she said finally. I want to see if we can build something real, even if it's scary, even if it might fail. Then try. On a Thursday evening in September, 6 months after Cassian had walked into her office, Lyra called the number he'd left with Margaret's assistant. Hello? It's me, Lyra. A pause. Then, hi. Are you free for dinner? When? Now, tonight, before I lose my nerve. She heard him moving, grabbing keys, closing a door. Where? Remember that Italian place? The one where you told me about your family? I remember. Meet me there in an hour. Lyra, one dinner. We'll talk, honestly, and then we'll decide if there's anything left to build on. Okay, I'll be there. She hung up and stared at her phone, her heart racing, wondering if she was about to make the best decision of her life or the worst one all over again. The restaurant looked the same. Same low lighting, same white tablecloths, same weight of history and possibility. Cassian was already there when she arrived, sitting at a table in the back, looking nervous in a way she'd never seen him look before. "You came," he said. "I said I would." "I know, but I wasn't sure you'd actually—" He stopped. "Thank you for giving me this chance." They ordered food they barely touched, drank wine that tasted like memory, and then, slowly, carefully, they started talking. Not about the past. Not about Vincent or the trial or the violence that had torn them apart. About now. About who they'd become in the years since everything collapsed. About what they wanted from life, from relationships, from each other. "I'm terrified," Lyra admitted halfway through the evening. "Terrified that I'll trust you and you'll hurt me again, that this will be another strategy I'm too stupid to see." "It's not a strategy. It's me trying to figure out how to be with someone without destroying them in the process." "And have you figured it out?" "No, but I'm willing to try, to fail, to mess up and apologize and do better. That's all I can offer. Imperfect honesty instead of perfect lies." "That's not very romantic." "Romance is overrated. Trust is better." She smiled despite herself. "When did you become wise?" 3 years alone gives you time to think." They talked until the restaurant was closing, until the staff was giving them pointed looks, until there was nothing left except the question neither of them wanted to ask. "So what now?" Cassian said. "Now we take it slow. We date like normal people. We build trust through actions instead of words. And we see if this thing between us is real or if it's just the ghost of what we almost had. And if it's real, then maybe we get a second chance. Maybe we build something that lasts. Maybe we prove that love doesn't have to be perfect to be worth fighting for. I can work with maybe." They left the restaurant together, walked along the Chicago riverfront with the city lights reflecting on the water, the air finally cool after another brutal summer. Cassian reached for her hand tentatively, giving her space to pull away if she wanted. She didn't pull away. They walked in silence for a while, just holding hands like teenagers figuring out intimacy for the first time. And when they reached her apartment building, Cassian stopped. "This is me being honest," he said. "I want to kiss you, but I'm terrified that if I do, I'll mess this up, that I'll move too fast or expect too much or ruin the fragile thing we're building." Lyra looked at him. This man who'd been a monster and a hero, who destroyed her and saved her, who was standing on a Chicago sidewalk admitting he was scared. "Then let me kiss you," she said, "and we'll figure out the rest as we go." She did. Kissed him soft and careful, the way you kiss someone when you're not sure if it's a beginning or an ending. And when they broke apart, both breathing hard, both terrified and hopeful in equal measure, she knew. This was a beginning. Not perfect, not guaranteed, not the fairy tale version where love conquered all and everything was easy, but real, messy, human, the kind of beginning built on ashes and survival and the stubborn belief that sometimes the people who break you are the only ones who understand how to help you heal. "Good night, Cassian," she said. "Good night, Lyra." She walked into her building without looking back, but when she reached her apartment and looked out the window, he was still standing there on the sidewalk, looking up at her window like he was memorizing the sight of her. She waved. He waved back. And somewhere in the distance, Chicago hummed with the sound of 8 million lives being lived, 8 million stories unfolding, 8 million people trying to survive and love and build something worth keeping. Livia Vale was just one of them, but for the first time in 3 years, she felt like her story might actually have a happy ending, or at least an honest one. And that was enough. Bullshit. Epilogue. Ba Nam Sao. The grand opening of the Vale Foundation was everything Cassian had planned and nothing Lyra had expected. The building rose 20 stories in the heart of downtown Chicago, glass and steel and modern design that somehow managed to feel warm instead of cold. The foundation's mission was printed on a plaque in the lobby, supporting children and families affected by organized crime, incarceration, and violence, building futures from broken pasts. Lyra stood on the rooftop terrace overlooking the city, watching the sun set over the skyline she'd fallen in love with years ago. Behind her, the foundation's opening gala was in full swing, donors and politicians and people who wanted to be seen doing good. But she'd needed a moment away from the cameras, away from the speeches, away from being the public face of survival and redemption. "Found you," She turned. Cassian was walking toward her with their daughter in his arms, 13 months old, dark hair like Lyra's, eyes like her father's. Elena Sofia Vale, named after the woman they'd both lost and the life they'd both chosen to build. She was fussing, Cassian said. I think she's done with the crowd. Join the club. Lyra took Elena gently, feeling the familiar weight of her daughter settle against her chest. How much longer do we have to stay? Another hour. Maybe 2. Then we can escape to our actual lives. Their actual lives. A house in Lincoln Park that Cassian had bought under his new name. Lyra's continued partnership at Chen Consulting. Cassian's work with the Foundation, turning his understanding of criminal networks into programs that helped families escape them. Date nights, arguments about whose turn it was to change diapers. The mundane miracle of building something normal from the wreckage of everything that had come before. It hadn't been easy. Those first 2 years of dating had been careful, fragile, full of moments where Lyra had nearly walked away because the fear was too much and trust felt impossible. But Cassian had been patient, had shown up every day ready to prove himself, had let her set the pace and respected every boundary she'd needed. They'd gotten married at the courthouse with Margaret and Anthony as witnesses. No big wedding, no spectacle, just 2 people choosing each other despite everything, because of everything, making promises they both knew would be tested and choosing to believe they'd keep them anyway. Elena made a small sound, her tiny fist wrapping around Lyra's finger. In the dying light, she looked perfect, innocent, untouched by the violence that had shaped her parents' lives. I was thinking, Cassian said quietly, about what we tell her. When she's old enough to ask about the Foundation, about why we started it. We tell her the truth. Not all of it. Not the parts that will give her nightmares, but enough that she understands people make mistakes. That love is complicated. That the most important thing is choosing to do better than the people who came before you. You think that'll be enough? I think it's all we can do. Tell the truth and hope she's strong enough to handle it. Cassian wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close, and they stood there as a family watching Chicago light up for the night. The city that had nearly destroyed them. The city they'd rebuilt themselves in. The city their daughter would grow up in, hopefully never knowing the fear and violence that had brought her parents together. Do you regret it? Cassian asked. Any of it. The choices that led us here. Lyra thought about it. About the girl she'd been 3 years ago, broke and desperate, walking home from a nightclub in heels that hurt. About the terror of that alley, the confusion of falling for someone dangerous, the agony of betrayal and the slow rebuilding of trust. About every hard moment that had shaped her into the woman she was now. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. Not the pain, not the fear, not even the lies. Because all of it brought me here, to this moment, to you, to her, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. Even knowing what it cost? Especially knowing what it cost, because the cost made it real, made it earned, made it something worth fighting for. Cassian kissed her temple, holding her and their daughter like they were the only things in the world that mattered. And maybe they were. Maybe everything else, the Foundation, the donors, the public redemption arc the media loved to write about, maybe all of that was just decoration around the simple truth that they'd survived. Together. Against odds that should have destroyed them. I love you, he said. Both of you. More than I knew it was possible to love anything. I know. That's it? Just, I know? Lyra smiled. What do you want me to say? That you love me too? I do. You know I do. But I also love making you sweat. He laughed, the sound low and warm, and pulled them both closer. Elena babbled something that might have been dada or might have been baby nonsense, and they both pretended it was words because that's what parents did. Below them, Chicago lived and breathed and survived. People in their apartments eating dinner. Couples on first dates nervous and hopeful. Families tucked in safe. And somewhere out there, other people were walking through alleys alone. Other lives were about to collide in ways they couldn't predict. Other stories were beginning that might end in tragedy or triumph or some messy combination of both. But up here, on this rooftop, with the man who'd once been the most dangerous thing in her life, now holding their daughter with hands that had learned gentleness, Lyra Vale felt something she'd spent most of her life chasing. Peace, not the absence of conflict, Not the fairy tale ending where everything was perfect, but the hard-won peace that came from surviving hell and choosing to build heaven anyway. From looking at your mistakes and your trauma and your broken pieces and deciding they were the foundation for something beautiful instead of something to hide. Ready to go back? Cassian asked. 5 more minutes? Let's just stay here. The 3 of us. Before we have to be the Valamorettis who represent hope and redemption and all those other words people use when they don't understand what survival actually costs. Okay, 5 more minutes. They stood there as the stars came out over Chicago, as their daughter fell asleep against Lyra's chest, as the city they'd nearly lost to spread out below them like a promise. And in that moment, Lyra realized something fundamental. The greatest danger she'd ever faced, the man who'd stepped out of the shadows that freezing February night and changed everything, had become the safest place she'd ever known. Not because he'd stopped being dangerous, but because they'd learned to be dangerous together, to fight for each other instead of against each other, to turn the violence that had brought them together into the strength that kept them whole. And as Cassian leaned down to whisper in her ear, "I protect what's mine," the words that had once been a threat now sounded like a promise of protection, of partnership, of choosing each other every single day despite the cost, despite the fear, despite everything that should have made love impossible. Lyra kissed him soft and sure, tasting the future on his lips, feeling their daughter's heartbeat against her chest, and knew with absolute certainty that the greatest risk she'd ever taken was also the best decision she'd ever made. Because sometimes the people who break you are exactly the people who can help you become whole. And sometimes love isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to try.